Hao was a mediocre twink NPC who got devastated when a giant monster attacked their city. The twink NPC wanted a swift, easy death, but he was saved by a top gigachat hunk celebrity Yule, who also happened to be an Esper. Not long after, Yule moved to an apartment next to Hao, who immediately activated his gay rom-com fantasy. Along the way, Yule had developed an unusual desire to develop plot with the twinkle douche NPC. Would the love story between an NPC and a celebrity really be possible? Time to find out. It was a hot, sunny day in the city, where a twink salaryman NPC named Hao Hu was walking along with his fellow civilians. Okay guys, I'm telling you now, I'm going to mess up his name in this story. I'm not sure if it's Hao Hu, Ho Wu, or Hao Wu, so bear with me, but I'll do my best. Anyway, the twink NPC was sleepy, so he bought a coffee to wake himself up. While sipping his coffee, he realized that there was something else that he wanted to sip. Nonetheless, the twink civilian continued walking, realizing how ordinary his life was as an NPC. One day, despair spread like fire as a two-headed, ugly, disgusting monster attacked the city. Amidst the chaos, Espers who could fight monsters made their debut and guides who could control the Espers from going berserk. Upon the appearances of the Espers and guides, humanity fought the monster invaders. Human civilization had returned to what it used to be, but ordinary NPCs could no longer leave the city. Nonetheless, city life had gradually grown safer as the number of monsters declined. The Espers became popular figures in society, and they continued hunting monsters. Then, when peace was re-established, the majority of the people became useless NPCs. As a precaution, the Espers and guides were tracked in the city, where everyone was required to take a test. Due to their extraordinary powers, Espers were easily recognized, but the same could not be said of the guides. The number of guides was far less than the number of Espers, so they were automatically brought to the Bureau of Espers and Guide Management, no matter what. Being an Esper or a guide guaranteed a lifelong high-paying job, so many people wanted to be like them. However, as an ordinary civilian, the mediocre twink was simply on his way to his job as an average salaryman. He sipped his iced coffee and wondered how his day would be when suddenly, he noticed something massive flying above. Apparently, a winged monster passed over him, shocking him in that instant. The monster started raging on top of a building, when all of a sudden Rubble-kun decided to isekai him since Truck-kun was on a vacation. Hao was stunned and his body trembled as he watched how it would end his life. As it got closer to him, he shouted for his dear life and closed his eyes, but deep inside he was hoping to finally end his miserable life. Suddenly a weird sound interrupted the tragedy, and the twink NPC dropped his iced coffee. As he slowly opened his eyes, there was a massive ice crystal in the surroundings, and a handsome gigachad with ocean eyes. At that moment, the miserable twink was surprised to finally see his knight in shining armor with a face card that could score 10s across the boards. The handsome gigachad looked at him with a smile, and soon enough he stepped towards him, ready to help him get up. He offered to escort him to a safer place, making him blush and thank him for his help. When their hands grabbed each other, a sudden electrifying sensation flowed over their body, making the Hao Wu suddenly feel sick. His body started quivering in front of the handsome gigachad, so he pulled him up for him to stand and held his other hand for support. As the handsome gigachad squeezed his small hand, Hao Wu told him not to worry because everything was fine, even though his face was telling the opposite. Hao Wu was slowly losing consciousness and could only watch his hero grow increasingly blurred. Moments later, the twink NPC lay on a couch, recalling how he woke up in a hospital and called his work to tell them he was taking a day off. Back at the present time, the miserable twink decided to take the opportunity to take a rest. Not long after, a sudden news flash was broadcast, with the reporter informing everyone about the monster that had recently attacked their city. That said, Hao Wu blushed again upon recalling the face of the handsome gigachad who saved him. The twink NPC could not help but compliment his hero's face card. Upon realizing that the Bureau posted information about their Espers, Hao Wu quickly tossed his pillow to check his hero's profile on his laptop. He browsed through the Espers' profiles and found the handsome gigachad's profile, discovering he was an S-class Esper named Yule. At that moment, Hao Wu realized that Yule was the first S-class Esper to ever appear in Korea, with his power manifested at an early age. As he grew older, his power grew stronger as well, and he became the captain of Esper Team 1, having the ability to control water and freeze it. Currently, he was the top G among the Espers in Korea, making the twink NPC realize that he was saved by the GOAT. Hao Wu wanted to thank him, but he knew to himself that the chances of seeing him were almost 0%, because he lived in a world of main characters while he was just a mere NPC. He mumbled his savior's name and felt some kind of connection with him that he couldn't explain. 2 months after the most recent monster attack, the company building where he worked was quickly restored with the help of some Espers. When he returned to his workplace, he noticed some empty seats and their workloads were passed on to him. A moment later, the twink salaryman slammed his body onto his bed, feeling so gloomy and tired from overworking. Hao Wu was so tired that he could not even go for a shower, but suddenly his doorbell started ringing and he was confused about who it was. The doorbell ringing continued, and it started to piss him off, so Hawu stood and angrily walked towards the door. However, he was stunned to see a man's broad chest on the screen of his front door cam. The NPC Twink was confused, so he clicked the voice message asking the person outside who he was. The hunk revealed he was his neighbor next door, revealing he had just moved that day, making him even more confused. Hawu then decided to open the door and saw a handsome GigaChad right before his eyes, bringing a chocolate-flavored dessert. It was offered to him, and for some unknown reason, the hunk seemed familiar with Hawu. The Twink NPC realized it was Yule, so he immediately closed his door, then opened it again, awkwardly asking if he had just moved next door. The two engaged in a staring contest until Yule smiled at him and confirmed his question. He was about to pass the plate of rice cake when their fingers touched, and Hawu felt the same feeling as last time. Hawu looked at the rice cake, utterly confused from what just happened. Then the hunk told him to eat it while it's still hot. However, Hawu noticed that it was already cold, so the two awkwardly laughed at each other. Suddenly, the NPC Twink stopped laughing upon noticing that the rice cake began steaming. Hawu flinched from the sight of it, and the hunk told him it tasted good. Yule looked at the Twink NPC's eyes, making him blush immediately. The next day, Hawu was still thinking about the rice cake, thinking it tasted so good. Suddenly, someone caught his attention, and it was no other than his hunk neighbor. The Twink NPC couldn't help but stare at the handsome guy beside him, making the guy ask if he had something to say to him. Just then, Yule pointed out that the elevator door had already opened, so the two immediately entered it. Inside, Hawu awkwardly told him that he thought an Esper like him would not take an elevator, making Yule laugh at him. The GigaChad hunk explained that if he simply jumped from the building, he might startle people living in it. When the elevator opened, Yule formally introduced himself to him, and Hawu did the same. However, the Twink NPC was surprised upon knowing that Yule already knew him. Later, they walked downstairs and exited the building, where Yule talked about visiting the hospital because he was to see someone, leading Hawu to ask if he knew a patient there. At that point, Hawu realized that Espers were like normal humans too. As they continued walking, Hawu giggled upon imagining Yule doing his clerical jobs. When they reached the subway, Hawu was shocked to see Yule suddenly disappear, so he looked back and saw Yule on the other side of the escalator. The Twink NPC looked at the GigaChad hunk, who romantically wished him a safe trip to work. Moments later, Hawu was caught searching for Espers, making his Twink coworker Kim wonder if he was interested in them. He denied it, and his coworker told him that they could be considered celebrities. The two Twinks continued their conversation, and Hawu revealed he was searching for info about Yule. However, he noted that they were too private and info about them was limited. Apparently, the only information about Espers was too basic, and there's nothing more to find out about them because Espers and civilians were living in completely different worlds. Kim wondered why he was searching for the food that Espers liked, so he told him that he was just curious. Just then, he told Hawu that the Espers might like the same delicious food they enjoy. That said, the NPC Twink bought some sweets and put them on a plate. Then he went to Yule's place and knocked on his door, and when it slowly opened, Hawu started getting nervous. Suddenly, he saw Yule dressed in some typical cleaning outfit. The NPC Twink was flustered upon seeing him, and the GigaChad hunk invited him to come inside, but he immediately refused to do so. Hawu did not want to bother his rest, so he only gave him the sweets and was ready to go. But Yule stopped him and asked him if he had eaten dinner already. He told him that he had not yet taken his dinner, so he told him that he might end up cooking too much, confusing the NPC Twink in the process. Then, just like that, Yule awkwardly invited Hawu to have dinner with him. Upon entering the hunk GigaChad's place, the Twink NPC was surprised to see how clean it was, unlike his place, which was a total mess. Suddenly, Yule touched his face and Hawu felt the same sensation again. While rubbing his face, Yule awkwardly asked if touching him caused him pain, so Hawu asked if Espers have some kind of electricity running through them. He denied it, and the Twink NPC wondered why he asked if it hurt him. The GigaChad hunk explained that they were much stronger than civilians, and he was struggling to control it sometimes. Yule then turned around, telling Hawu that the dinner was ready, so he silently looked at Yule. Soon enough, the Twink NPC chugged down the GigaChad hunk's tasty meat down his throat. Then Hawu was surprised when Yule noticed they had the same taste in food. The GigaChad hunk was delighted that the Twink NPC enjoyed his meat. Just then, Hawu noticed that Yule was getting a call, pissing him off in that instant. He quickly stood and told him that he had to go, but he did not allow Hawu to go because he wanted him to finish eating his meat. The Twink NPC refused to do that, but the GigaChad hunk told him it was fine before grabbing his coat and jumping from the balcony. Yule then smiled at him and told Hawu that he would see him later. Hawu could only look at him as he jumped from the balcony like a gust of wind, leaving him alone in Yule's apartment. Later on, the Twink NPC was having a dream about him walking down a bright, magical space that he had been dreaming about since he was a kid. The place in his dream seemed very comfortable, and he remembers how the hand that touched him grew along with him. Suddenly, a seemingly hot guy called his name, and he suddenly woke up feeling something weird. A new day means another day of work for Hawu, when suddenly he noticed a present from Yule. He took the present and blushed as he looked at it, realizing the paper bag was filled with his favorite snacks. While looking at the present, Hao thought of inviting Yule for a meal that they can share together. That said, he left the sticky note on Yule's door, which contained his invitation. Meanwhile, the Espers assembled, led by Yule, ready to fight the monsters invading the city. A massive spider monster was rampaging when suddenly Yule sliced it down and the blood that splattered smudged his face. Soon enough, a red-haired Esper joined him, and he created a flaming barrier to protect them from the monsters that surrounded them. Then another Esper that uses wind magic chimed in, telling him that their formation had fallen apart. Hearing that, Yule ordered everyone to gather around. The compatibility between an Esper and a guide was called sync rate, but Yule was not compatible with most guides because they could not handle his growing power. This made Yule feel frustrated because he also suffered from incompatible guiding. Apparently, the Bureau continued assigning guides to Yule, even last night when he was suddenly summoned. The head introduced a newly manifested guide to him, but he seemed unhappy about it. Despite that, he pretended to be receptive to the Bureau's effort to find him a guide, and he received guiding until his eyes turned black. That said, 20 guides had fainted from the strain coming from him. It turned out that whenever he used too much power, he had to receive painful guiding. Nonetheless, Yule did not hesitate to use his full power to finish all the monsters because he knew that Hao would get out of work soon. Meanwhile, at work, the twink co-worker noticed a bright aura from Hao. Then he asked him if he had brought an umbrella, so he told him he did not because he didn't expect it to rain that day. That said, he invited him to go out for a drink, and the NPC twink agreed to do so. It's raining very heavily outside, and the two realized that even with an umbrella they would still get wet. All of a sudden, they noticed an Esper walking under the heavy rain, and people seemed to avoid him. Hao realized that ever since Yule saved him, he often noticed Espers around them. Suddenly, a man began approaching them, and he called Hao's name, shocking Kim in the process. It was no other than Yule, and he asked if Hao's office was nearby, revealing he was about to call it a day. The twink NPC happily told him that he was about to have a drink with his coworker, who seemed to be trembling in fear. Kim nervously greeted him, and Yule greeted him back and introduced himself to him. He could not stop trembling at the presence of Yule, and he felt sad because people were usually afraid of them. Hao noticed his mood changed, so he turned to Kim, who immediately canceled their drinking plans, before he quickly went away, leaving the two under the heavy rain. Yule wondered if he had ruined their dinner plans, which Hao quickly denied. Unfortunately, neither of them brought an umbrella, so he was worried that both of them would get drenched in the rain. Hearing that, Yule removed his glove and swung his hand, activating his power, which caused the sky to clear up instantly. When the sun suddenly appeared, Hao was so amazed at what he had just witnessed. Hao asked Yule if he was the one behind it, so he smiled and told him that he should have done that sooner. Yule also used his magic to extract the rainwater from Hao's clothes, making him feel amazed even more. The twink NPC noted that with his magic, he could stay dry like a desert in the rainy season, which made Yule laugh. Then the two went to the subway, and as usual, Yule did not follow him on the escalator. Realizing this, Hao suddenly paused, turned back to Yule, and asked him if Espers were taking subways. Yule confirmed this, but explained that if he were to take it, people would be afraid to him. Hao then asked Yule to meet him in the subway near their apartment, but realizing they could not go home together, Yule became sad. That said, Yule offered a more convenient way, which Hao accepted. Just then, he grabbed Hao's hand and pulled him towards him, shocking the twink NPC in the process. He lifted him like a princess and jumped in midair, making Hao feel scared. However, Yule smiled at him and told him he wouldn't let him fall, so he eventually relaxed and took a glance at the beautiful cityscape. The twink NPC was astonished by what he had just witnessed, and Yule laughed at him as he blushed like a ripe tomato. The GigaChat hunk looked at him as he awkwardly blushed even more. Yule put Hao's hand close to his chest, and he felt a weird sensation. Soon enough, they reached their apartment building, and the NPC twink quivered from the experience. Just then, he felt extremely awkward when Yule allowed him to touch him however he wanted. The GigaChat hunk then grabbed Hao's hand and put it on his face, making him blush harder from so much thrill. His hand started flinching as he awkwardly looked at Yule's face. The next day, Kim apologized for leaving Hao behind the day before, admitting he had been overwhelmed by Yule's presence. He then told him that he could not face him anymore, so he wanted to apologize through him, making him feel better. Just then, Kim asked Hao why he was not scared of Yule. When he got home, the question lingered in his mind, so he started browsing the internet for more information about Espers. From his search, he found that guiding involved physical contact, which made him realize that it was the very reason touching him was not a big deal for him. That said, Hao thought it would be better to keep his distance from him. Not long after, he heard a series of loud bangings on his door, making him wonder who the heck it was. Suddenly, he heard a familiar voice calling him from outside, so when he opened the door, he quickly asked why he was there on a weekend. His visitor was a handsome silver-haired guy bringing some food and drinks for them to share. Hao Uju asked the handsome guy named Dohyun what he knew about Espers, and he found it very random. After chugging the beer down, Do-hyun wondered if he was caught by an Esper doing something bad. Pissed off, the twink NPC asked if he really knew something about Esper stuff. Do-hyun continued chugging down the booze, while Hao Uju started pouting about it. Do-hyun got pissed and told him to stop beating around the bush. That said, he told him that a friend of his could not stop thinking about a guy, but Do-hyun knew he was referring to himself. Hao Uju continued that the guy helped him 2 months ago, making Do-hyun realize that he had a crush on someone. He continued telling that his friend and the guy met again, and the guy remembered his friend, but Do-hyun was not convinced. Then Hao U revealed that his friend was invited to dinner in his place, shocking Do-hyun in the process. The twink NPC continued his story, making Do-hyun feel uneasy, so he clarified that his friend was not invited to join a cult or a pyramid scheme. Their conversation continued, and Hao U insisted that he was not the one in his story but his friend. When Do-hyun asked him what his friend wanted to do with the Esper, he blushed and became speechless. That said, Do-hyun told him to tell his friend to stop dreaming because Esper's brains work differently. He even revealed that Espers rely on their guides and that a relationship with one would mean you are okay for someone else to touch your partner. That said, Do-hyun concluded that he was just hitting for Hao U for fun. When the twink NPC asked if he was just fooling around with him, Do-hyun did not hold back in confirming it. Hao U then wondered if that was true because he was just an average-looking guy, which Do-hyun also agreed with. Suddenly, the two were shocked to hear loud door bangings outside. When they checked it out, it turned out to be a female guide named Hee-won, who seemed very mad at Yule's sudden request. She immediately gave a cold stare at the two for eavesdropping, but she quickly apologized for the commotion she had caused. The two then tried talking to her, who was now tapping at the door like a prim and proper girl. She then started calling Yule's phone, and the irritation on her face was too loud not to be noticed by the two losers. Do-hyun moved closer to Hao and wondered what exactly was going on. The female guide was fuming in anger, so Do-hyun moved even closer and squeezed Hao's shoulder upon hearing Yule's name. Soon enough, the GigaChat hunk came out and gave a menacing glare at Do-hyun, who was touching his twink neighbor. Do-hyun felt the chill down his spine, but Yule started talking to Hee-won, while Hao removed his friend's hand. Hee-won started complaining about Yule's behavior, but he seemed not to care, as he immediately grabbed her by the hand and told her to start guiding her right there and then. Hee-won could not say no, so she did it, and the guiding happened in that instant. Suddenly she felt sick, and she absorbed all of Yule's sinister aura, turning him back to normal. After the guiding, Hee-won felt even more sick and left the building, almost ready to pass out. The GigaChat hunk looked at the two and apologized for the commotion, and the twink NPC quickly asked him if he was sick. While they were talking, Yule gave a cold stare at Do-hyun, making him feel scared. Hao introduced Do-hyun to Yule, and they went back to their respective apartments. Then, the twink NPC told the GigaChat hunk that they would be quiet so he could relax. However, Yule was left standing outside, seemingly uncomfortable because his twink neighbor was with someone else. Moments later, Do-hyun started feeling jealous, seeing how Halby slept peacefully in Yule's arms after getting sober from drinking beer. Yule stared at the twink NPC, making Do-hyun feel upset by the sight, so he kept chugging the booze down his throat while playing his third wheel role. Moments earlier, the Halby was so anxious about what kind of medicine he should give to his Esper neighbor. Then their conversation was diverted to whether Yule was a human or not. Halby kept on checking the medicines until he found one, so Do-hyun simply told him to give it to Yule, making him very happy. When Halby gave the medicines, Yule accepted them, and he blushed as he expressed his appreciation towards him. At that moment, Halby's eyes sparkled upon witnessing such a face card. He then smiled at him and told him to always let him know next time if he was sick. The GigaChad then tried to deliver a pickup line, and suddenly he looked at his eyes and moved closer, making the twink NPC get stunned. He blushed and tried to look the other way, but Yule took the chance to riz him even more, moving even closer and making him blush even harder. The moment was interrupted by Do-hyun, who called Halby to go inside already, but upon seeing Yule, he started emanating fear. Halby bid him farewell, but the GigaChad hunk decided to join them for a drink instead. The twink NPC felt confused because he needed to rest, but still decided to let him join. That said, Halby immediately went to Do-hyun to inform him, making Yule happy. Upon hearing their conversation, Yule smiled, but when he heard Do-hyun's comment about Halby, his mood suddenly changed. Back at present, Do-hyun seemed not in the mood, as he was so pissed off to see how comfortable Halby was sleeping with someone else. Halby began snoring from deep sleep, so Do-hyun simply looked at him. Soon after, Do-hyun confronted Yule about his interest in Halby, telling him to stop if he was just toying with him. Do-hyun continued talking about his concern for Halby, but Yule remained quiet, making Do-hyun wonder if he heard him. Just then, the GigaChat hunk gave him a cold stare, asking why he should listen to him. Halby felt the cold, so Yule immediately changed his mood so that he would not make him feel cold. Do-hyun was weirded out by Yule's mood swings, so he asked him if he was serious about Halby, but he told him that it was none of his business. Do-hyun got scared when Yul revealed that he was only letting him live because he was Halby's friend. He then asked Yul if he lost his mind, and Yul responded by emanating a menacing aura. His action sent chills down Do-hyun's spine as Yul looked at him with a menacing glare. The next morning, Hao woke up with a severe hangover and feeling too dizzy, when suddenly, he was surprised to see his apartment so clean. The twink NPC knew that Do-hyun could not do such cleaning, so he assumed it was Yul who did it, considering how clean he was in his apartment. However, that made him realize that he owed him an apology again. Nonetheless, Hao knew that he needed to get ready for work because his phone was ringing the alarm. Moments later, while on his way to work, the twink NPC decided to call Do-hyun to know if he had gone home safely. While on call, Do-hyun told him that he had a conversation with Yul, and he thought he was not a bad guy. Then, Do-hyun expressed his approval for Yul, which made Hao feel a little confused. Hao expressed his confusion, so Do-hyun clarified that upon talking to Yul, he realized that he was a good guy, and he ended the call because he was still driving. Hearing that, Hao felt relieved and happy that everything seemed fine. Moments later, Do-hyun texted him because he was on the news, and he knew it was him based on the picture, and Hao confirmed it. Apparently, reporters had released some speculations about the two, and Hao could not stop blushing with embarrassment while boarding the subway. Do-hyun then reminded him not to read the comments, so he decided to delete the message so it would not pique his curiosity. Suddenly, the twink NPC felt something weird, and as he stood there, the feeling intensified. While wondering where the passengers went, a man bumped into him. Hao apologized to him, but when he looked at him, he realized that he was also an Esper. The red-haired Esper gave him a cold stare, and the two ended up in a staring contest. While the Esper stared at him, Hao asked him if he was okay, so the Esper revealed that he knew him because of Yul. He wondered why he wasn't afraid of Espers like him, so he laughed and told him that it was nice meeting him. He introduced himself as Seung-won, and shook hands with Hao before asking him if he had seen the news already. Hao confirmed it and asked him if his presence on the subway wouldn't attract more attention. Seung-won agreed, so he removed his coat, surprising Hao in the process. Seung-won then laughed before using his jacket to cover the twink NPC as he pulled him out of the train. Hao asked him if it would not only create a bigger commotion, but he simply smiled at him and told him that it was time for them to pass through. As usual, civilians paved a way for the Esper, and Hao started trembling because of what was happening. He could hear people murmuring around them, and soon enough he found himself sitting beside a secluded table. Hao began overthinking, and when he noticed the cracked and stained walls, he started trembling in fear, thinking he was kidnapped. Hao was quivering in fear when he heard two familiar voices talking about him as a guide, and they turned out to be Yul and Seung-won. Yul immediately changed his aura when he looked at Hao, which Seung-won immediately noticed. Seung-won lost his mind when Yul started acting sweet towards the twink NPC. Meanwhile, Hao's fear suddenly shifted to relief upon seeing Yul around. He then asked him if he was feeling better, so the GigaChat hunk revealed that he was feeling better because of him. That said, the twink smiled and offered his help if Yul became sick again, which he gladly accepted. Seung-won could not believe his eyes because Yul was acting completely strange. All of a sudden, Yul gave him a menacing glare, and all Seung-won could do was awkwardly smile. He quickly shut the door, and the GigaChat hunk smiled at Hao, asking if Seung-won was rude to him. Suddenly, Yul's mood was spoiled when Hao complimented Seung-won for being creative when he caught him like a criminal. He told him that it was an unusual experience and asked what Seung-won meant when he showed up to protect him. Yul then got the coffee and transferred some into a mug, explaining that his involvement with him might cause him trouble. The GigaChat hunk offered him the coffee, and he thanked him for it. Yul then called another Esper named Jinhyuk, while Hao quietly sipped his coffee. The Esper revealed that 3 reporters had been caught snooping around his apartment, and Hao was left stunned upon hearing they would dump them for another week. He explained that the article would probably get a lot of views, leaving the twink NPC speechless. Apparently, people were dying to know his identity, but he assured Hao that things would calm down in a week. That said, he told him that he could stay there in the meantime, shocking Hao greatly. Yul took his hand, grabbed his finger, and told him that he would take him to a place where he would stay. Moments later, a beautiful facility was shown by Yul, and Hao was amazed by the beauty of the place where he would be staying. He couldn't help but stare at the beautiful fountain outside, while Yul quietly stood behind him. The whole building is massive, and Yul explained that he needed to accompany him whenever he needed to leave, because he had no access card. Then he told him that if he had any questions, he could ask him any time. The twink NPC wondered if it was okay for him to stay there, so the hunk GigaChat assured him about it. Yul explained to him that he could have anything he needed because Jinhyuk could bring them all to him. When he opened the door, Yul showed him a massive room, which greatly surprised Hao for its aesthetic. Yul was happy that he liked his room, and he asked to give him his hand because he gave him a pager watch. Once again, Hao wondered if it was okay for him to use that, so Yul blocked all the other functions, leaving only the access to call him. Suddenly, the twink NPC apologized before bowing his head and telling Yul that he should go get some rest. Hao sat on the sofa and Yule removed his coat and put it on the couch. While the twink NPC looked at his white coat, the Gigachad hunk took off his clothes, shocking him in that instant. Yule looked at the blushing Hao before flexing his muscular back to him and revealing that he would stay there as well. Yon Saiken then gave Hao something to eat, so his hungry self could not help but eat what was served. His mind was filled with the Gigachad hunk's topless moment. Suddenly, he grew worried about them sleeping together, recalling Dohyun's words about him sleeping with someone else. Unexpectedly, the door opened and his eyes widened upon seeing the Gigachad hunk in his wet look, flexing his hard rock abs and asking him if there was a problem. Yon Saiken asked him if he wanted to say anything, but Hao immediately denied it. Not long after, Yon Saiken asked how he felt whenever he addressed him too formally. Yon Saiken and to do the same to him, making Hao feel awkward. Then the Gigachad hunk pointed out he felt the same way, so he wanted him to call him more casually. Hao wondered what he would suggest, and he was surprised when he wanted him to call him Hyung, meaning older brother. The twink NPC was completely dismayed by the brother's own moment, which hurt Yon's feelings. He then explained his side about being comfortable with people, so Yon suggested calling him by his first name to make it less awkward. That said, when Hao called him Yon, he was stunned, and he felt so happy. The next morning, the twink NPC woke up feeling legally confined and he saw some flashy clothes for him to wear. He then started crying about his situation, called his department manager, and was surprised when his manager granted him a week off before he bid his manager goodbye. When he started checking what was outside, he saw the female guide who had visited their apartment before. Hee-sun immediately felt embarrassed upon recognizing him. She found Hao's outfit so adorable and realized that Yorn was the one behind it. Hee-sun reminded him to be careful around Yorn, and the two engaged in a conversation about Esper's doing everything they can to get the guide that they wanted. However, Hao explained that he was not a guide and that Yorn was just being nice to him, and Hee-sun could not believe what Hao just said. While on it, Hee-sun explained that Hao should be careful around Espers with purple eyes, and informed him about Seonwoo, who was the mind control Esper of Team 1. Hee-sun reiterated that all Espers were dangerous. Soon enough, she asked Hao why he called out to her, so he asked about the whereabouts of Yorn. Hee-sun then checked his device and informed Hao of Yorn's location, making the twink NPC very happy. Nonetheless, Hee-sun told him to change his outfit first. Then, just like that, Hao wore a guide's uniform, and Hee-sun was delighted to tell him that it suited him well. The two then made their way to Yorn's location, and when Hee-sun opened the door, Hao was left dumbfounded by the sight of two Espers fighting with their full power. Eula recalled Hao's word complimenting Seong-won's creative act, which obviously pissed him off. Soon enough, Seong-won entered their training ground to have a one-on-one with the Gigachad hunk, who seemed extra scary at that moment. The two did not waste time. They activated their powers, with Seong-won initiating the fight. He clashed his flame power against Yule, who seemed unfazed at all as he blocked it with his ice power. Seong-won was ready to deliver another finishing blow, but Yule simply countered it with his water magic. Seong-won got injured in the process, but Yule seemed not satisfied as he activated his ice power. Seong-won grew excited and prepared to deliver a powerful strike in one go. The two charged their power, and soon enough they attacked each other. The impact of their clash triggered a massive explosion. When the dust settled, Yule was standing before Seong-won, who was lying on the floor. Seong-won struggled to stand up, but Yule was giving him the "you deserved it" face. Just then, Yule noticed Hao-hyu and Hee-won watching them, so he decided to move closer to them, leaving Seong-won alone. Hee-won immediately made her exit excuse to get away from Yule, when suddenly Hao-hyu informed Hee-won that Yule was already looking at them through the looking glass. Yule wrote a note on the window telling them to wait for him, but Hee-won continued with her exit excuse, telling Hao-hyu that if he heard that she died, she wanted him to kick Yule's man plot for her. Apparently that was the only way he knew he could do any damage to him. Then she quickly ran like she was in a marathon, leaving Hao-hyu alone. Not long after, Hao-hyu noticed that the place was well built, while the two facilitators were starting to worry about Yule's arrival. Soon enough, the Gigachad hunk arrived like a breeze of cool wind right behind Hao-hyu, who confronted him for scaring him that way. Then his mood shifted, asking about Hee-won's whereabouts. When Hao-hyu revealed she had run away, Yule turned to the facilitators, asking if they had let her leave. However, Yule's mood turned back to normal when Hao-hyu apologized for the trouble he caused. He told Yule that as a civilian, he should not wear the guide's uniform. Seeing that, Yule told him the uniform suited him well, but warned him not to wear it again, knowing other Espers would start flirting with him. That said, Yule offered him his hand to Hao-hyu so they could go back to their room. Hao-hyu blushed at the situation and happily held Yule's hand. Soon enough, the Espers group chat started talking about Yule and the assumed new guide, who happened to be Hao-hyu. Meanwhile, Yule asked the twink NPC to take a walk after lunch, which Hao-hyu happily agreed to. The two were holding each other's hands like a couple, while the people behind them started whispering about it. Nonetheless, they continued holding hands like true lovers. Moments later, the two shared a very delicious lunch while talking about Howell's work leaves. While Yule asked him about it, Howell kept on munching the food as usual. Howell then explained that taking time off would mean a ton of work would be waiting for him. After getting scolded by Howell, Yule started sulking like a kid. Seeing his reaction, Howell decided to give him comforting words before informing him about Hee-won's message for him. When he revealed that it was about his guiding, Howell suddenly noticed Yule pouting like a little kid. As they continued eating, Yule explained the drawbacks of incompatible guiding to both espers and guides. Then Yule revealed he had only 38% guiding compatibility, meaning he needed 20 high-level guides to complete his guiding. Yule revealed to him that he had found a compatible guide for himself, but explained that the person was very unique and he could not let the Bureau treat him like property. He further explained that given the extremely low number of guides, he could not control the espers out there from using that guide for themselves. Just then, Yule stood up and leaned closer to Howell, telling him that it was the representation of the uniform he was wearing. That said, he wanted him to take it off. After changing his outfit, Howell called Yule too formally again, so Yule did not respond to that call. Yule only responded when Howell called him by his name, making Howell realize what just happened. Nevertheless, the twink NPC found his childish behavior cute. While Yule was doing their laundry with his convenient power, Howell told Yule that he was reminded of a washing machine as he spun the clothes. Yule then volunteered to wash Howell's clothes, making him startle. Seeing that, Yule smirked and reiterated that Howell actually compared him to a washing machine. When Howell told him he'd just misspoken, Yule riz him, saying he would wash his body from head to toe. The twink NPC then simply thanked him for his offer. Moments later, the two started walking in the park, but little did they know that Hee-won was just nearby watching them. While wondering if something bad was about to happen to Yule, an Esper suddenly whispered in her ear. Apparently he went to her for guiding, so she grabbed his hand to perform it. However, the Esper seemed pissed and annoyed at how Yule ordered him to monitor the reporters while he was simply enjoying a date. It turned out that the Esper had purple eyes, the one that Hee-won warned Howell about. Fortunately, Seon-woo seemed no longer interested in civilians, because his mind control over them often did not end well. Hee-won told him he would always follow Yule's orders, and Seon-woo agreed, knowing how frightening Yule was. Hearing that, Hee-won was pissed off and ended her guiding for him. Not long after, the door opened and Seon-woo stepped out to greet Howell. Howell got scared by his presence, so he hid behind Yule. Just then, Seon-woo greeted his captain, but Yule seemed not in the mood for his BS, so he immediately informed him about the task he assigned to him. Seon-woo then asked him if Howell was his neighbor, but Yule simply called out his full name and gave him a menacing glare. Seon-woo simply smiled and leaned closer to Howell, greeting him and introducing himself to him while looking at him with his purple eyes. Seon-woo handed his hand for formality, and Howell happily smiled and introduced himself to him. The two shook hands and Seon-woo felt a weird sensation, so he asked Yule to confirm if Howell was a guide, which he immediately denied. Seon-woo then asked if Howell got tested when he was 15, which he confirmed, revealing that he was not an Esper nor a guide. Seon-woo then suspiciously glanced at Yule, who seemed worried about something. That said, he asked Howell if he wanted to get tested again, irritating Yule even more. The Giga Chad hunk then grabbed Howell's hand and told Seon-woo to stop being rude to his guest. Seeing that reaction, Seon-woo became even more interested, especially upon seeing how soft Yule was to Howell. Seon-woo then reiterated that he was just suggesting before assuming that Howell was Yule's boyfriend, making him blush so hard. Howell denied it, so Seon-woo continued interrogating him, making Howell reveal that they were just neighbors, which pissed Yule so much. Seon-woo kept interrogating them as he watched them hold hands. Howell noticed where he was looking, so he immediately removed his hand from Yule's, hurting his feelings in the process. Yule became even more sad when Seon-woo began flirting with Howell, showcasing his face card right before his eyes. However, Howell rejected him right away, making Yule grab him, which surprised Seon-woo even more. Yule started pouting before Howell with his teary eyes, seeing that Howell became so worried about him, so he tried giving him some comforting words. However, Howell clarified to him that they were not dating, so Yule asked again before admitting he had never been close to anyone since childhood. The twink NPC felt guilty about it, so he quickly apologized, making Yule hug him so tight. Just then, Yule's eyes sparkled, fascinating Seon-woo in the process. Seon-woo then told Yule that Hee-shin was waiting in Team 1's guiding room before bidding them farewell. Moments later, Hee-shin was in the guiding room when Yule and Howell came to her. As usual, Hee-shin was very unwilling to do Yule's guiding but still decided to do it anyway. Yule then looked at Howell for approval, so Howell watched over him as he walked towards Hee-shin. He stared at the process of guiding and realized that he had been receiving that treatment since he was younger. Seeing Yule struggling, Yule couldn't help but feel bad for him. Just then, the Giga Chad hunk asked him if he was not bored, which he denied immediately, explaining to him that he found guiding really interesting. Apparently, the effect was way worse for the guide, So after reaching her limit, Hishin sat on the bed and lay down, feeling very weak. Yule seemed not yet okay, so Hishin asked him if he would summon more guides. The GigaChat hunk knew he could not force Hishin to continue, so he contacted other guides to complete the guiding. Soon enough, they heard people outside the room, knocking on the door. When the door opened, they were a bunch of guides who seemed very unwilling to do guiding with Yule. Yule looked at them and with a cold aura he told them that he needed guiding. After doing several guiding processes, several guides had fainted, and Yule seemed tired from it as well. His blue eyes turned back to black in the process, so Haobu asked him if it hurt a lot. He looked very worried for Yule, so Yule leaned on him, assuring him not to worry about him. Not long after, Haobu asked Yule about the one he mentioned with a high sync rate with him. Yule explained that he met that person even before he entered the bureau 21 years ago, when Yule's Esper ability manifested at the age of 9. Haobu recalled that Yule considered that person unique, so he asked whether he was already a guide when they met. Yule told him he wasn't a guide, but Haobu hoped he would meet that guy again so everyone would be happy and Yule wouldn't suffer anymore. Nonetheless, realization came to Haobu upon thinking that one day Yule might need to share a bed with somebody else. The sun is setting, and the sound of the beeping pager watch woke up Haobu. Suddenly, he saw Yule leading the Espers and guides, but the GigaChat assured him there's nothing to worry about. Just then, Hee-Won chimed in and Yule told her to go to the location first. The beeper sounded to remind Yule not to be late, so Haobu asked him if he would be gone long. Yule gave him the key card and assured him it would be quick and that he would be back soon. The two engaged in a staring contest, and Haobu smiled and bid him farewell. When Yule left, Haobu walked towards their room, but when he was about to enter the door, someone pulled him back and threw him, crashing on the floor. It was a white-haired Esper who came late from the emergency gathering. The Esper gave Haobu a cold stare and asked him how long he was going to stay on the floor, and asked him why Yule was fixated on him. Then he nudged his shoe on his back and asked him if he was good with plot development. The Esper's eye turned green and a wind slashed Haobu's face because he got pissed off by Haobu ignoring him. Apparently, his voice sounded familiar to Haobu, and the Esper told him that he should know his place. Haobu recalled a green light caller from the Yule's pager and realized what his name was. The Esper asked why he dared to get close to Yule, and he twitched when Haobu called him Moon, which was his name. The twink NPC wondered what Moon was thinking, but he clarified his accusations with him and happily told him that he was free to love Yule all he wanted, then dashed away from him. Moon was pissed and he felt bad because he did not mean that to happen. Not long after, Yule entered the room and stood behind the door, before sliding downward with his injured knee. He then recalled Do-hyun's words about Espers and realized why Yule did not want him to wander around. Haobu recalled Moon's words and felt bitter about it because in that place, he knew that he was nobody. Haoyu patched his face cut with a band-aid while staring at the ripped pants. He then recalled how Songwon and Sonwoo were not as intimidating as Moon, who scared the shit out of him. That said, he wondered if he should tell Yule about it, but then he thought that it would be pointless. Soon enough, he checked his phone and saw that Do-hyun's calls and messages filled his notification. And just like that, he contacted Do-hyun, who yelled at him because he was so worried about not hearing from him the whole day. Haoyu apologized for leaving his phone and sat on the sofa, when suddenly Do-hyun interrogated him for not going to work. The twink NPC explained that Yule took him to the bureau, so Do-hyun told him through phone that Yule would not go that far if he did not like him. Haoyu wondered why Yule would like him, so Do-hyun assumed that it could be love at first sight and that he should give him a chance. Apparently, Haoyu had been in 2 failed relationships. The first one was with a cheating husband, and the second one was with an emo guy who both lost interest in him after a few days. Do-hyun pointed out that his past relationship had involved humans, but Yule was an Esper, and as long as he kept physical contact to a minimum, it should be fine. However, the twink NPC recalled Yule's words about that very unique person, and told Do-hyun that Yule had a problem, but he could not tell him. Do-hyun then assumed that Yule had a soft Excalibur problem, so Haoyu immediately denied it. Haoyu was pissed off by his words, so Do-hyun gave him some motivation before hanging up. Just then, Haoyu felt extremely odd, and he wondered why Do-hyun suddenly becomes so encouraging about his relationship goals. Moments later, Yule came back to their room and saw a sleeping Haoyu. The injuries that Haoyu had on his body did not escape his eyes while he lifted him to put him on the other side of the bed. The next morning, Haoyu woke up from Yule's hug, so he tried to let go, but Yule seemed deeply asleep. Just then, Haoyu touched something hard, so he wondered what it was, but soon enough he blushed so hard upon realizing that it was Yule's massive hard Excalibur. He then tried his best to wake up Yule, so he woke up and their faces were too close to each other, and he told him to let go of him. Moments later, Yule interrogated Haoyu about his injuries, but Haoyu lied and told him that he had fallen over while he was running. However, Yule did not seem convinced by his story when suddenly someone knocked on his door. When Yule opened the door, it was no other than Moon, so Haoyu quickly recognized him. Moon immediately noticed Haoyu, so he quickly called his attention and started lashing out his anger to him. Hearing that, Yule figured out what really happened to Howie. Yule started clenching his fist and told Howie that he would take a day off, which surprised him. They all had a dead air moment, so Howie congratulated him on his day off. Just then, Yule informed him that it was the first time he would take a day off, and he asked Howie for a date. How blushed after hearing Yule's date invitation, infuriating Moon in the process. Moon could no longer hold back his frustrations, so he told Yule that he was doing the wrong thing. But Yule silenced him by simply calling out his name and making a gesture for him to shut up. Moon was left speechless, and Yule grabbed Moon's shoulder, telling How-Do-I to excuse him for a while. How-Do-I reluctantly agreed, and he was left alone inside the room, thinking about what was taking Yule so long. While thinking how Moon was rude to him, How-Do-I heard someone knocking the door. The man outside asked if anyone was inside because Yule sent him over. When he opened the door, a middle-aged healing Esper named Taishik introduced himself. Yule sent him over to heal How-Do-I's injuries, but the Esper told him that he looked fine to him because he thought that he lost his limbs, scaring How-Do-I in the process. Nonetheless, Taishik still healed How-Do-I's wound, and all his injuries were gone in an instant. How-Do-I was impressed by his healing ability, and he thanked him for it. Just then, Taishik wondered if How-Do-I was a guide by any chance, but How-Do-I immediately denied it. However, Taishik seemed not convinced because he was giving some Esper-like energy. That said, he asked How-Do-I to let him hold his hand, and he allowed him to do so. Unfortunately, Taishik only became even more confused, as the sensation was something he already felt before. Nonetheless, he told How-Do-I to ask Yule about it instead, because the difference between their abilities was massive, that anyone below A class would not sense it. Taishik then asked How-Do-I if he wanted to ask anything, so How-Do-I asked when Yule would come back. He assured How-Do-I that Yule would be back soon because it had been a long time since he had seen him that mad. Just then, the two bid farewell to each other, and How-Do-I watched Taishik exit the room. Moments later, in broad daylight, the two talked about Moon, and Yule assured him that he reprimanded him just enough. Soon after, Yule started feeling upset that How-Do-I's mind was preoccupied during their date. How-Do-I then paused for a while and asked Yule if he was interested in him, which he confirmed. That said, the twink NPC asked him why, because they barely knew each other. Yule then took the opportunity to riz him, telling him that they have known each other enough for him to love him. How-Do-I then looked down, explaining he was just a civilian, but Yule raised his head. Then Yule explained why he liked him, telling him that he was the only civilian who looked at them differently, unlike most people who looked at them with fear because to them they were like monsters. Just then, How-Do-I brought up what Seon-Woo told him before about him dating a civilian, so Yule explained that Seon-Woo only managed to date a civilian out of fear. He explained further that civilians could never truly understand Espers, which made How-Do-Woo feel bad. Yule then grabbed his shoulder and told him they weren't rushing, because he wanted How-Do-Woo to see him as himself, not as an Esper. How-Do-I looked at Yule's hand and stared, blushing, while Yule simply smiled at him genuinely. Soon enough, the two went straight to a mall, where Yule asked him if How-Do-Woo liked watching movies. At the cinema, they chose an action movie entitled Mad Twan. Then How-Her revealed to Yule that he was watching in the cinema every now and then, while it was Yule's first time watching at the cinema. The twink NPC blushed so hard when he discovered that Yule saved his first time for him. Suddenly, Yule's pager started buzzing, so he apologized to How-Her and told him that he would be back before the movie started. How-Her looked at Yule walking away and gave himself a sigh of relief because he did not know how to react to Yule's words. He then began contemplating how to deal with Yule when a cinema attendant called his attention, asking them to move to a quieter area. How-Her stared at her and told her that his friend stepped out for a moment, so he could not leave his seat. The cinema attendant seemed troubled, so How-Her looked at the people sitting behind them who were talking about banning Espers from cinemas. She informed How-Her that some customers were feeling uneasy because of an Esper nearby. Not long after, Yule came back and asked what was going on, but the cinema attendant scaredly told him there was no problem at all. How-Her looked at Yule and upon realizing the situation, told him their movie date wasn't good that day before dumping the bucket of popcorn in the garbage station. Yule apologized for what happened and he seemed down because their date did not go well. He then asked How-Her to look at him, but How-Her refused, furious at how people acted the way they did. How-Her was upset that Yule seemed to be acting like it was fine with him. The twink NPC then began crying, and Yule let him know that the way he treated him was the very reason why he loved him. Not long after, How-Her calmed down and he apologized for his action. Yule then invited him to watch the movie later, and he assured him that they had a lot more things they could do. Yule reiterated that they could eat dinner at How-Her's place, watch the Mist movie, and told each other to inform each other if they got sick. How-Her blushed at the thought of it, so he covered his blushing face, which made Yule feel very happy. After that, Yule noticed How-Her's swollen eyes, so he used his ice power to ease the swelling. While Yule touched his face, How-Her confessed to feeling something weird whenever he touched him, unlike the other Espers. Yul then figured out that it was the reason why Howher asked him before if he had electricity through his body. Yul also found it very odd, so he moved closer to his face and asked Howher if it felt unpleasant when he touched him, but Howher denied it, making Yul feel very relieved. The GigaChat hunk then asked Howher if he was not really afraid of him, so Howher looked him in the eyes and smiled, telling him his eyes were beautiful. Yul blushed so hard when Howher told him that his eyes were like jewels. That said, Yul moved closer to Howher until their face were just a few inches away. Howher became speechless, anticipating what was about to happen. Suddenly Yul kissed him on his forehead, which was way too far from Howher's expectations. Howher blushed so hard after that, and Yul asked him with a smile about where they should go next. Soon enough, the two entered a cafe, and as usual, people kept their distance from them as if they had COVID or something. Time passed, and it was already nighttime, so the two moved to a restaurant for dinner, but as usual, the waiter started shaking at the sight of an Esper. Hao noticed it, and he could not help but clench his fist in annoyance. Later that night, the two sat on a bench in the park under the bright moonlight, talking about how much they enjoyed the day. Once again, Yul expressed his happiness on their first official date. Meanwhile, Hao was speechless because of all the things that happened in between. Then, with teary eyes, Hao told Yul that his shoelaces were untied. Yul immediately tied his shoelaces, but Hao told him he could do it himself. The GigaChat hunk told him in a sincere tone to give him the chance to do it for him. So he tied his shoelace properly and told him not to reject him just because he was an Esper. Yul then raised his head and looked at Hao, telling him to let him stay by his side. Hao's evil thought was telling him to snap out of it and face reality, but his good thought was telling him that Yul genuinely loved him, and turning him down should not be an option. The evil thought then asked whether he was okay with other people guiding Yul, leaving the good thought speechless. However, the good thought fought back and asked whether he really disliked Yul, and his thoughts kept arguing in his mind. Moments later, Hao felt terrible deep down because he couldn't decide what to do. Yul told him that even if his care for him was just out of pity, he was begging him to let him stay by his side. Hao's mind was in a great chaos because Yul was an Esper, so Yul asked Hao if he had a headache, which he immediately denied. Yul looked at him with worried eyes, telling him to tell him right away if he was unwell. Just then Yul brought up Moon, the Esper that left a strong impression on Hao. Apparently, he wanted to apologize to Hao, but Yul reminded him that he was not required to forgive him right away. Hao then learned that Moon was only 20 years old, which pissed him off because he was older than him. Yul then checked the time and told Hao that Moon would be there any moment. Just then, Moon burst into their room as fast as he could and bowed his head before Hao, apologizing for what he had done to him. Hao was left dumbfounded by the sight of it, so he was left with no other choice but to forgive him. Yul, on the other hand, looked at Moon and told him he could leave already. Moon immediately agreed to do so, and he walked outside the room as fast as he could. Hao then lost his mind when Yul told him that he could discipline him even more, hearing that Hao told Yul that it would be unnecessary. After that, Yul also informed him that all the reporters outside Hao's apartment were gone already, making him very happy as he could finally go home. Hearing that, Yul felt sad knowing they had to live apart again. Hao tried to cheer him up, telling him they were neighbors, but Yul was still sad. The twink NPC then reiterated that they should sleep comfortably, thinking it would be awkward for them to sleep in the same bed. When Yul asked when he wanted to return, Hao told him to get ready to leave. The two then reluctantly made their decision, although deep down they wanted to do it the other way around. Then they stood face to face with each other, and Yul blushed so hard when Hao invited him for a movie dinner at his place. Yul gladly accepted the offer, and the two happily talked about the dinner they would share, then bid each other farewell. When twilight arrived, Hao happily served the dinner he prepared. On the other hand, Yul seemed unhappy because it turned out that Do-hyun was also there for the movie dinner. Seeing their reaction, Hao wondered whether they didn't like the food he'd prepared for them. Do-hyun then called Hao-do to confirm the movie dinner he had invited him to, and Hao-do confirmed. Hao-do then told them he'd gotten some snacks and a movie for them. Apparently, Hao-do only invited Do-hyun because he did not want to feel awkward about being alone with Yul. Do-hyun, on the other hand, realized what was happening, so he shrugged it off and decided to eat the food already. Soon after, they made popcorn and settled in to watch the movie, with Do-hyun sitting between them. Do-hyun activated his third wheel energy again, while Yul was convincing himself that everything would be fine. Just then, the two accidentally touched each other when they decided to get popcorn. The two then engaged in a staring contest as the movie they were watching turned into a kissing scene. Their eyes sparkled as they romantically stared at each other. Just then, Do-hyun broke their momentum when he suddenly got up and started stomping his way out. It turned out that Do-hyun decided to go somewhere else, but Hao-war grabbed his hand and asked him why he was leaving all of a sudden. Do-hyun then coldly told Hao-war he was being insensitive and should leave him out of his dating life, before leaving completely. Hao-war was left dumbfounded by what had happened when Yul suddenly told him he appreciated his effort. Yul then asked Hao-war if he picked that movie on purpose, so he admitted that he invited Do-hyun on purpose, but the movie was chosen based on good reviews. The two then decided to continue watching the movie, when suddenly Hwar apologized to Yul. Yul, however, told him that he was free to push him away. Nonetheless, the Gyuragar hunk told him to do his best because he would also try his hardest. The next day at work, Hwar apologized to Do-hyun through chat, but was still stressed out about Yul's feelings. Just then, someone called out Hwar's attention, and it was a red-haired lady offering a coffee to him. She told Hwar what they had done during his absence, and he thanked her and decided to treat her to dinner. The red-haired lady then suggested treating her to dinner that day, so Kim also asked Hwar if he could join them. Hwar agreed, so the three happily decided to push through their dinner plans. The three decided to eat at an Italian pizza resto, and Hwar was reminded of his time with Yul, but he forced himself not to think about it. Just then, Hwar was asked what he had done during his vacation, and he said he had simply stayed home. After asking about some status stuff, Hwar told her that she had no girlfriend, which surprised her greatly. Kim supported her view about Hwar and asked him whether the person they ran into last time was his friend. Kim was referring to Yul, which made the red-haired girl feel very excited. Just then, Hwar was reminded again of his sweet moments with Yul. The red-haired girl reminded Hwar how handsome Yul was, but Kim chimed in to say he was intimidating in person. Hwar, however, disagreed because he wasn't afraid of Yul at all. While looking at the pizza, Hwar wondered whether the people might be exaggerating about the Espers. Hwar then revealed that he first met Yul when he saved him from falling debris. He blushed and explained that Yul was kind and considerate. The red-haired lady began to wonder if something might be going on between the two, which Hwar immediately denied. Kim noticed that Hwar turned red as he explained that he and Yul could not be in a relationship. Meanwhile, the red-haired girl did not make sense with what Hwar said, explaining that whether he was an Esper or civilian, he could always break up if things did not work out. Hwar looked at his glass of beer and started blushing again. After his dinner time with his colleagues, Hwar went back home wobbling from drinking too much. He wanted to get drunk to forget Yul, but it only made matters worse. Just then, he paused from walking because Yul was right in front of him. Yul looked at Hwar with disappointment, and Yul looked at him in awe. The GigaChad hunk looked at him without saying anything, but suddenly turned around, leaving Hwar utterly confused. Yul came back to his place, recalling a toddler calling his name, and a smile spread across his face. Not long after, someone was knocking at his door, and it was no other than Se-in-woo. Yul acted so coldly to him, so Se-in-woo informed him about Moon's situation and told him to go easy on him. However, Yul was not ready to consider his suggestion, so he asked what his true intention was, which caught him off guard. Apparently, Yul almost never administered the Esper and Guide test, but did it once when he met Hwar. Back then, the young Espers were taking to each other when Se-in-woo saw Yul walking alone. His eyes were shining in a blue color, while his cheeks were blushing so hard. Se-in-woo was surprised to see such a reaction from him. It turned out that Yul had been obsessed with Hwar for 21 years and counting. Se-in-woo then speculated that Yul was a pedophile, but he quickly denied it. The chair fell as Se-in-woo continued talking, explaining the fact that Hwar was a guide. Yul got mad at him for his speculations, and his menacing aura scared the shit out of Se-in-woo. Yul calmed down and leaned back in his chair, explaining to him that Hwar was a civilian. Se-in-woo did not dare to continue with his topic. Meanwhile, Hwar was on his way to work when he received another present from Yul. It was a bunch of Hwu's favorite snacks and drinks. Just then, Hwar noticed some Espers approaching him, asking if he was not a guide. Hwar told them they were mistaken, but the Espers seemed not convinced at all. Suddenly, Hwar ran away as fast as he could, leaving the Espers confused as hell. Soon enough, Hwar stopped running as he hid behind the fire exit door. He grabbed his phone to call Yul and realized that he did not have Yul's phone number. Left with no other option, he tried contacting the bureau instead. His call was received, and he requested to talk to Yul, but the customer service thought he was just another prank caller, which he strongly denied. Hwar insisted he was not pranking at all, so the customer service accepted his request. Later at night, Hwar was exhausted from work because his manager forced him to work overtime. Just then, the twink NPC's eyes grew bigger upon seeing Yul right before him. Yul happily assumed that Hwar was waiting for him, which dazzled Hwar in the process. Hwar was then confused after Yul declared their impending date, which made Hwar blush. While talking in the middle of the night, Hwar became worried about the reporters, but Yul assured him that there was nothing to worry about. Yul's words kept playing inside Hwu's mind, which continued giving him a perfect blush. Little did they know someone was spying on them. Before entering the apartment, Hwar brought up that he called him through the bureau, but Yul seemed unaware of it. Hwar explained that he made that call because they did not have each other's numbers. Yul reminded him about the watch pager but decided to give his number instead. He asked Hwar what his concern was, so he explained that he was mistaken as a guide by two Espers. Hwar wondered if he was in trouble, so when Yul confirmed it, he was left stunned. Yul gave him comforting words, and Hwar somehow felt relieved. He smiled, assuring him that everything would be all right. Hwar looked him in the eye and wondered if he was serious or not. Yule told him not to overthink as he grabbed his hands and took his chance to riz him about surrendering his heart to him. The twink NPC blushed so hard and he was left speechless by what Yule just told him. Just then, Yule stared at his back and wondered if there had been a cat around the area. Yule then excused himself to go to a convenience store, but Haupor clung to his hand. Realizing what he just did, Haupor quickly held up his hand and told Yule that he would head home before bidding him farewell. The GigaChat hunk then looked at the bush and commanded someone to come out. It turned out to be Sion Wu, who came to check on Haupor, wondering how Yule created him. Yule told him that Haupor was not a circus animal, so Sion Wu told him to let him off the hook. Suddenly, Sion Wu asked him if Yule had heard the news that the minister's daughter had manifested as a guide recently. Sion Wu clarified that he had not turned her into a guide. He told Yule he had to test their sync rate, so he had to date her soon, which Yule found pointless. Sion Wu started crying that Yule had to appease the higher-ups before revealing that he had been very busy keeping all the pesky guides at bay. Yule remained quiet, but Sion Wu suddenly asked him what his plan was after taking over the bureau. It turned out that Sion Wu wanted to get rid of the wall of the bureau and ban the imprinting processes. Sion Wu then wondered if Howie was just okay, especially since Yule took too much interest in him. He told Yule that he was so obsessive but he was taking good care of Howie, so he bid him farewell. Yule quickly turned in the direction of Howie's apartment. Moments later, Yule entered his apartment and lay on his bed while having a deep thought. Howie went out of the bathroom and Yule listened to his every step. Unfortunately, Howie forgot to buy himself dinner, so he decided to eat some tuna instead. Yule shut his eyes as Howie started eating his food and he felt relieved knowing he was fine. Meanwhile, Howie pondered what happened, but in the end, he told himself to snap out of it. Yule then blushed when Howie finally went to his bed, which was a wall away from him. A week later, the bureau announced that Minister Deong Chel's daughter Seon Young had manifested a guide, and her sync rate with Yule was 72%, which was a remarkable result. The imprinting was announced to take place after Seon Young reached legal age. At that point, Howie recalled Do-yeon's words again about Yule only hitting him for fun. 1 week earlier, the door swung, and the Yule's team told him that he was late. Yule, however, told them that he had to take care of some stuff. Just then, Yule's hand slided and his face was giving a sleepless facade. Song-won mentioned about him getting a new guide soon, which he confirmed. Yule entrusted his duties to Song-won, who wondered how long he would be gone. Hearing that, Heesum was delighted by the idea that Yule won't be around for a while. Song-won and Taeshik felt like she was so happy for some reason. After Heesum expressed his delight at her temporary freedom, Yule dismissed them all. However, Taeshik and Song-won remained in their seats, so Yule wondered if they wanted to say anything. Song-won told Yule that he only wanted to see his face a little longer, while Taeshik seemed hesitant to ask. Nonetheless, Taeshik decided to ask anyway about Howie because to him there was something unusual about him, yet he was not an Esper nor a guide. Taeshik revealed that he was familiar with Howie's energy, so he asked Song-won the same thing, but he refused to say anything. Yule then asked Taeshik if he remembered where he felt the same energy. Taeshik revealed he was no longer sure, but he was sure that Yule felt something as well. The GigaChat hunk played the I Know Nothing card, making Taeshik feel mistaken. When Taeshik left, Yule and Song-won were left inside, and Song-won wondered if Yule was the one behind it. However, Yule denied any involvement with it because he himself wanted to hide the truth. Hearing that, Song-won told Howie that he had been so sneaky ever since, but also told him that he only learned them from managing his thoughts. Song-won revealed that the minister planned to have her daughter imprinted by Yule. Meanwhile, Song-won refused to do guiding to any Esper unless it was the strongest one, and she also belittled other Espers seeking for guiding. Earlier that day, the minister reluctantly agreed to her daughter's demand, but the man who administered the sync rate suggested other S-class Espers, Sion and Yunshin. When it was Yule's turn to do the sync test, he put his finger on the holographic screen, and the test almost made Sion collapse. The sync rate results were 65% for Sion, 49% for Yunshin, and 13% for Yule. After realizing that she was not compatible with Yule, Sion put the blame on Yule. Despite her protests, Yule remained quiet as he watched Sion's daddy dearest tolerate a spoiled brat. The man administering the test warned them that imprinting with Yule was too dangerous because of the low sync rate. However, Sion was unwilling to back down, so she tried her best to seduce Yule into developing a plot with her. Yule only looked down at her, so Sion smirked and brought up Yule's weakness. She tried to lean closer to Yule, but the GigaChat hunk evaded her advances and went directly to the other two S-class Espers. Sion was delighted to see Yule around, and Yushin felt the same way. Yule called out Sion for being rude, but she seemed pretty convinced he hadn't done anything wrong. Meanwhile, Yushin was a gentler version of Sion. While Sion was bugging Yule from behind, Yushin simply watched them. Just then, Yushin noticed the minister and the administrator quarreling. The minister slapped the administrator in the face, so Yushin asked the two if they should stop him. However, both Yule and Sion seemed not willing to do so. It seemed like the S-class Espers had bad blood with the administrator. The minister then ordered Sion and Yuchen to confiscate all of Yule's devices. However, the two S-class Espers were not willing to do it either. They tried protesting with the minister's command, but Yule stopped them from doing so, and he willingly let them confiscate all of his communication devices. The minister then accessed Yule's device, and when he saw Yule's pager watch, commanded them to confiscate it as well. The administrator then reminded the minister that the pager watch was meant for emergencies and that he should let Yule keep it. Apparently, the device could only connect to another pager from the bureau. The minister then dropped Yule's phone on the floor and stomped on it to destroy it. The minister reminded Yule that his life was in his hands, which Yule acknowledged. The administrator then ordered Yule to proceed to the isolation facility, where guides would arrive shortly. Inside the isolation room, guides were falling one after another after guiding Yule. However, Yule's eyes were still blue, which somehow frightened the next guide. She was unwilling to guide with Yule, but the administering guide told her that many guides would die for the opportunity. She reluctantly agreed to do so, but when Yule grabbed her hand, she instantly felt sick. She begged Yule to stop, but Yule continued, and the guide saw her life flash before her eyes. After that, another guide fell on the floor, and Yule's eyes were almost returning to black. When the last guide appeared before Yule, he told the GigaChad hunk to go easy on him. The two stood before each other, and they initiated the guiding process. Instantly, the guide felt so sick, but Yule seemed satisfied and elevated their guiding process. Yule then squeezed the guide's hand, and Yule pushed him to his limit. After guiding with all the sent guides, Yule left their pile of bodies looking extremely drained. Just then, Yule's eyes turned black again, and he was not sure how long he could control his power. On the day of the press conference, the media were gathered around for such an important announcement. The announcer started the press con, and Yule stood up and stepped his way down to Xianyang. Yule gladly offered his hand, which boosted the ego of Xianyang. The GigaChad hunk reminded her not to hold on to any hard feelings. Yule then looked at her with dead eyes, and the two, along with the two other S-class Espers, went to the stage. The media started asking them, and Xianyang was the first one to answer, followed by Yunchan. Just then, a female reporter raised Yule's issue about having no compatible guides, so Xianyang clung to Yule's arm and confidently revealed that they had a 72% sync rate. The announcer then supported the lie, making it very believable for the media. Yule was confident that Hao would not see the broadcast, but he knew Du Haoyan would let him know about it. The thought of it triggered Yule's eyes to turn blue again. Xianyang then whispered to Yule that other guides were willing to guide him for the next 5 years and that she was too busy to guide him herself. Yule smiled and agreed to her, which boosted Xianyang's ego again upon seeing how obedient he was. While the media took several photos of them together, Xianyang informed him about his accommodation. She then told Yule that they would be on national TV the next day, so he should dress nicely. Hearing that, Yule told her that he would keep that in mind. Moments later, the three S-class Espers went into their accommodation room, talking shit about Xianyang. Xian believed it was not fair to follow whatever she wanted, so Yule explained that their power lies in the number of Espers they command. Xianyang, however, was more pissed that their accommodation wasn't as impressive as she told them. Just then, Yanshin spoke, awkwardly asking the two if they would like to get something to eat. Xianyang grew excited and suggested they grab some beer. Yanshin's heart popped from the excitement, and his eyes sparkled when he suggested he could buy some beer in advance. Xianyang then told him just to buy anything he wanted to eat before moving closer to Yule to tell him that Yanshin was so innocent. Just then, Xianyang changed his tone and asked Yule if he wanted some dating advice from her. Xian suddenly teased Yule for having no date experience at the age of 30. Yule was embarrassed by the fact that she knew the posts about him online. He awkwardly looked at her when suddenly Xian seemed way beyond confused that someone like Yule was actually dating. Xianyang gave her a suspicious grin, but Yule activated his serious mode, commanding her to hand him the phone. Xianyang then bargained with Yule to tell him about his love life in exchange for phone access. The two then sat down and talked about Yule's dating life. Xianyang got excited upon hearing his story, but Yule told her that he would borrow Yanshin's phone instead. Yule was then pissed by Xian's warning to zap Yanshin's phone before he could borrow it. The GigaChad hunk then answered her question one by one, and he told her that she was making it sound like he was having an affair. When Xian asked who the guide was, Yule refused to answer. She then asked if it wasn't a guide, and Yule immediately denied it. At that moment, Xian realized that Yule wanted to borrow her phone to inform the person about it. Xian's words started punching Yule 3 times in a row until he was knocked out. She then asked Yule about the person's age and learned the person was already 28. After that, Yule had a hard time answering which part he found attractive. Apparently, Yule loved every part of Hao Hu, so he told Xian that everything about that person was attractive. Xian had goosebumps upon learning that Yule was not dating a guide, so she reminded him that the person might care about how he received guiding. Xian then reminded Yule how he had to figure out a way to eliminate the monster. She then asked Yule for the person's number of the person, so Yule wrote it down on a piece of paper before giving it to her, asking her to tell the person that he would be back soon. After getting the number, Xian quickly ran to send the person the perfect text. Seiyan texted the number with BRB, explaining it meant be right back, pissing him off in the process and commanding her to hand him her phone. Moments later, Hao assured Yule that he was okay, because they were not dating after all. Yule then asked for an apology, but Hao asked him what were the sorry about. Hao kept talking to him over the phone, but he hung up because he was on a train. Looking at Yule's number, Hao started to rattle and started wishing Hao bad luck. Soon enough, the phone vibrated, and he received a text, BRB, from an unknown number. Then another message arrived, confusing Hao because it said he should carry what he had given him at all times and never leave it at home. Hao thought that someone was just pranking him, so he texted the unknown number back and blocked it, feeling pissed off by the whole situation. The phone showed that the number was blocked by Hao, and Saikian laughed at Yule for getting blocked. Yule was too stunned to speak, and he started emitting a menacing aura. Before things could turn the wrong way, Yuchen arrived and Yule calmed down instantly. Yuchen, being the innocent Esper that he was, simply wondered what was happening. When night arrived, the three S-class Espers talked about Yule's date. Feeling left out of the topic, Yuchen couldn't help but cry and asked if this person was the one Yule was texting. Yule was not having it, so he told Saikian stop using him as their topic. Saikian realized that Yule was truly in love with someone, and she had no idea that Yule was kind of a hopeless romantic type of guy. Yule then pondered their comments and confidently told them he was indeed romantic. While they were having dinner, Saikian suggested fixing the problem with Hao. She then mocked Yule for struggling with the situation, saying that her life as a battery was better than a clown's. Just then, she mentioned that Yuchen had the worst skill since he was made to interact with monsters like a typical anime beast tamer. Yuchen then asked if it was okay for Saikian to talk BS, since some people in the corner were listening. Just then, Saikian stopped drinking and looked at Yule, asking him if he would do something about it. As Yule's eyes turned blue, his water magic engulfed the two spies, and just like that, he drowned them with his water magic. As Yule shut down his eyes, his magic disappeared, and the two spies dropped unconscious on the floor. Yule moved closer to the two unconscious bodies, and he grabbed them both by their collar, telling the two S-class Espers that he would handle them himself because he had enough of them. The Giga Chad's steps echoed in the silence, and the weather outside began to rumble. Seiyan had a bad feeling about it, but she smirked and told Yunshin that it was a good opportunity for them, so Seiyan asked to use Yunshin's phone. Elsewhere, in the middle of the night, Do-hyeon and Hao watched the interview of Yule, when suddenly Do-hyeon turned off the television. Hao felt so devastated after watching that video, so Do-hyeon asked him if he wanted to stay at his place for a while. Hao declined his offer, telling Do-hyeon that he was a grown-up and he could handle himself. They then cheers again, and before they knew it, they already finished several bottles of booze. While Do-hyeon was deep asleep on the couch, Hao laid down on his bed. He was lost in his thoughts as he recalled a memory he had with Yule. However, Hao was so pissed, thinking that Yule was such a liar and realizing that he fell for him harder. His phone started vibrating, so he checked who was texting him at that hour. The twink NPC became speechless as he read the message, that if they got lost it would be a serious problem. Hao thought that it was another prankster who kept chatting him for not responding to her. He told the sender that he would block them, but they kept initiating a conversation. When Hao finally replied, Seon introduced herself to Hao, who quickly acknowledges her as one of the S-class Espers. Hao wondered why she was texting him and how she got his number. After some explanation, Seon asked Hao if Yule and him were dating, which he denied. However, when Seon asked if he was Yule's boyfriend, Hao blushed and face-palmed himself from embarrassment. Just then, Hao realized something, so he quickly looked for the pager watch that Yule gave him when he recalled the message earlier. Hao felt an extreme relief upon realizing what really happened, so he unblocked Seon and asked her why Yule used her phone earlier. Hao became suspicious when Seon explained that Yule was being monitored, so she explained that the Bureau was the one behind it all. Hao recalled Yule's face and confirmed about their high sync rate, and the two had a conversation about sync rate that no one cared about. Seon explained that imprinting would mean that a guide could no longer guide anyone but the imprinted Esper. Yule then asked about the imprinting process that only adult could do, so Seon explained that the imprinting was kind of inappropriate. Nonetheless, Seon assured him that Yule would not imprint with Seon before bidding farewell. Just then, Hao noticed the thunder outside rumbling like a wild beast. Soon after, Hao took the pager watch, tried to navigate it, only to realize that Yule was the only contact in it. Hao then wondered if Yule would answer if he would use it to call him, and just like that, he accidentally ended up contacting Yule anyway, and the ringing continued. Hao was shocked at what happened, and he panicked on how he could hang up the call. Just then, it was answered, and Yule was already on the line. Soon enough, Yule asked Hao if he needed some help, making him feel guilty from all the overthinking he did. Hao confirmed it, and Yule apologized for being busy, but promised to visit him soon and reminded him of what he told him before about him being serious about him. The heavy rain continued to pour when suddenly ice came pouring down as well, making Do-hyeon wonder if he could go home with that situation. Ice began falling heavily on Do-hyun's car, and he knew that Yule was the one behind it. Meanwhile, Howell was just speechless as he observed the rain, so Do-hyun wondered what was going on in his mind. Just then, Do-hyun whispered on Howell's ears, sending him chills down his spine. When Do-hyun asked if he was listening, Howell apologized for not paying attention. Do-hyun asked Howell about his watch, and Howell seemed could not tell him what it was. That said, Do-hyun realized that something was going on, so he confronted Howell for what happened while he was asleep. Howell explained that he just got untouched with Yole, revealing that he called him. This made Do-hyun lost his cool, thinking Howell had no pride at all. The twink NPC confirmed all of Do-hyun's speculations, making him fumed in anger. Do-hyun had enough and realized that Howell was the biggest idiot he ever met. The two then had some conversation under the heavy rain, and Do-hyun reminded Howell to always put himself first. Howell reluctantly agreed, so Do-hyun bid him farewell. While walking away, Do-hyun turned around and told Howell to take care of himself, reminding him to be smart and not do anything stupid. As the rain continued procuring down, Howell let a sigh of relief when suddenly a drop of rainwater touched his nose. He then wondered what Yole was doing at that moment, because if the weather was caused by him, then he should be worried about him. Meanwhile, in the guiding room, a guide trembled upon seeing Yole, because he knew he could not guide him at all, especially with his overwhelming power that manifested around him. The storm continued brewing around the bureau, and the cars in the area were taken away by the flood. Meanwhile, in the guiding facility, a guide trembled in fear, knowing he could not guide Yule. The GigaChad hunk was about to initiate the guiding process when suddenly a doctor arrived, asking Yule why guiding was not working for him and allowing the guide to leave. Yule smiled at him and told him that he should know it himself. Apparently, the doctor was still paid even if he made no progress at all. Yule then told him that he would go berserk again and asked him if it was not exciting for him. He then reminded him of what happened back then. Apparently, the doctor was one of the people who came to get him that day. Yule told him that time flies so fast, as he was no longer the youngest member of the bureau, but he currently held the top position in the research team. Just then he told Yule to get out and leave the city immediately, and never come back. Yule then asked if he was afraid of him, making the doctor falter from his threat. The GigaChad's hunk power surged around him, telling the doctor that he thought he did not fear anything. The water level started rising, and the doctor asked him if he thought they should all die together. Yule then shared his sentiments about accepting guidance from people who do not understand him. Soon enough, someone burst in, and it was no other than the angry minister, who called Yule a beast and was forcing him to accept guiding already. Yule then threatened him that he would move to another city, making the minister burst in anger. Just then he noticed some people moving closer, and they were none other than the two other S-class Espers. Yule was there standing in front of them when Sion looked at him with a menacing glare, telling him to dry him off. Yule agreed to do so, and Sion told him to stop the annoying rain already. In an instant, Sion dried up, so she asked Yule if he was planning to self-destruct. The GigaChad hunk then looked her in the eye, telling her she would see it herself soon. Their conversation was suddenly interrupted by Yunshin, who was asking Yule to dry him as well. Yule ignored him, making him feel bad, while Sion told him she was more important than he was. The minister could not believe what was happening, so he started to reprove them all. Just then, Sion gave him a little electric shock, causing the minister to fall on the floor. She started taunting him as she charged with electric power all over her body. Moments later, Yunshin looked in awe as he stared outside as the doctor left the bureau. Yunshin then thought that everyone would run away, and Sion thought of the same thing. Meanwhile, Yunshin tried to reach someone on his pager watch, and he looked at Sion as his device started ringing. His call was answered by Sion Wu, and he gave him the cue to carry out their plan. Sion Wu then confronted him for going too far, the rain becoming so severe that it flooded the city, forcing the Espers and guides to fully deploy to help the civilians. Sion Wu said only Hao Wu's apartment was untouched, but Yunshin played the I know nothing card. He told Yoon to stop playing dumb and ended the call to go back to work. Sion realized that Yoon's lover was a man, so she became a bit confused. Apparently, she expected Yoon's lover to be a small, fragile woman. Just then, Yunshin excused himself as he would call Jeon Woo. Sion then told him to call her if he went berserk, so she could snap him out of it. However, Yoon smiled and insisted on calling his guide instead. Sion asked him who would be willing to guide him, so Yoon thought of a smiling Hao Woo, telling her that he promised to come right away when he needed help. As the rain continued pouring down, Hao Woo stared at the window. While he looked at his reflection in the glass window, his watch pager started beeping. It started showing a GPS location. Soon enough, Hao Woo talked to the pager watch, but Yule was speechless. That said, Hao Woo asked him if something had happened, but he was breathing heavily. As he called his name, Hao Woo got weirded out by his voice. Back then, it was also raining heavily outside, and the young Yule's eyes glowed in a blue color. Yule's father was lashing out at his wife over the odd things they were experiencing. He insisted that a monster like Yule had to die, but they wondered how they could kill him. They think that doing so might get them killed in the process. Yule's father then had an idea to eliminate him by leaving him without a guide. He also suggested hiring someone to feed him while they live elsewhere. Yule heard everything, and he was heartbroken to learn that his own parents were planning to eliminate him. Days had passed, and Yule's eyes glowed even more when suddenly, a young Hawu appeared behind the curtain of the bed where Yule was resting. At that moment, Yule went speechless, yet he felt a pleasant summer warmth. Young Hawu asked him if he was sick because he was always in bed. He visited him the next day and offered to read a book for him. Day by day, the two became closer to each other, and Hawu even told him that he would ask his mom to take them there, which Yule agreed to. Hawu promised it to him, and just like before, Yule was hoping to be saved by him. Back at the present, Hawu went against the flood and braved the storm. While moving, Yule was talking to him using the pager watch, assuring him that he would be there for him. Hawu passed through the wild flood, but he stumbled and fell. Despite that, he tried his best to stand up again, but he got his foot injured in the process. Not long after, he reached the facility, but he seemed very tired. Nonetheless, he decided to move forward, and when he opened the door, cold breeze welcomed him. Hawu noticed that the entire facility was almost frozen. Hawu began to worry for Yule. That said, Hawu quickly looked for him, and he wasn't even scared at all. When he reached the frozen fountain, his eyes grew larger upon seeing Yule standing beside a massive ice crystal wall. Yule seemed feeling very weak, so Hawu felt extremely bad for him. That said, Hawu decided to take a step and move towards him. Hawu stopped maintaining the ice crystal wall, so the water started rampaging. Seeing that, Hawu rushed towards Yule, and just before the water would wash them away, Hawu managed to reach Yule. The flood went wild, but suddenly, a massive towering tornado saved them from drowning. Inside the tornado was Hawu leaned closer to Yule, and just like that, the twink NPC kissed him, and the guiding process activated in the best way possible. Hawu felt a tingling sensation, so Yule asked him if it was painful. He then told Yule that it felt strange, and Yule was happy that it was not painful for him. That said, Yule asked Hawu to help him a little more, so Hawu closed his eyes and got ready for another lip therapy. Hawu then gripped Yule's sleeve and eventually released it. All of a sudden, the heavy rain stopped and the flood quickly subsided. The sun shone as if nothing bad happened at all, and Yule went out lifting Hawu like a Disney princess. Yule looked at Hawai's face as he fell unconscious on his shoulder. Later that evening, Hawu was not feeling well as a side effect of guiding Yule. Hawu decided to drink some water when suddenly he saw Yule's jacket wrapped around him. Hawu sniffed it before putting it beside his bed. The twink NPC stood up and he saw Yule inside the room. Yule could not meet his eyes straight because he was reflecting on his actions. The Gigachad hunk then asked him if he was okay, so Hawu told him that he felt a little weaker. Hawu recalled what happened earlier and asked Yule what happened. Yule assured him that he did nothing strange to him. The Gigachad hunk looked him in the eye and told Hawu that he was welcome to touch him however he wanted. Yule then bowed his head, so Hawu reached for his face and he felt a warm feeling. Hawu was surprised that he was no longer as cold as ice. The twin NPC flinched his finger, so Yule grabbed his hand, telling him not to be afraid. Their eyes looked at each other and they locked in their hands like lovers. Hawu was then surprised to see that something was happening, so he asked Yule if he had become a guide. Yule then explained that Hawu was a guide, but he could not guide other Espers like regular guides. Hawu then removed his hand from Yule's and asked him if he had nothing to say to him. Yule was caught off guard by his question, so he sincerely apologized to him. He asked Hawu if he hated him, but Hawu remained silent. Hawu asked if Yule was not being monitored, so Yule informed him that the monitor had fled the city. Just then, Yule forced Hawu to go back to bed for some rest. After that, he turned off the lamp to let Hawu sleep peacefully. All of a sudden, Hawu heard loud bangings on his door, with someone threatening to destroy it if he did not open it. Hawu checked if Yule was still awake, and the threat started sending chills down his spine. When the voice started counting, Hawu stared panicking and he was about to lose his mind. However, Yule started hugging him, and he heard the door open. It was none other than Seon Woo, and right behind him was Seon. The two of them continued talking until they saw the two lovebirds cuddling in bed. All Hawu could say was hello, and he felt so embarrassed. Hawu took a peek and saw Sideruan and Siderwoo standing before them. Sideruan confirmed Hawu's identity, and she told him to just let Yule sleep. Sideruan and Hawu had a conversation, and Sideruan could not believe that Hawu really fainted. She then tried asking Siderwoo, but he told her that she would not get anything from him. While the two were talking, Hawu was just watching them. Just then, Yule told Sideruan that if she was afraid of the consequences, she should not ask questions. Yule then got up and greeted Hawu with a good morning. He leaned closer to Hawu's ears and asked why they were around. Siderwoo told Yule that he was just there because he stopped Sideruan from destroying the door. He then reminded Yule to clean up the mess he made, and Sideruan agreed to it. While talking about some work-related stuff, the two Espers were just watching Yule hugging Hawu. Suddenly, Yule asked Hawu if he was hungry, but Hawu told him that he needed to go back to work. Hawu's batter ran out, and he told him that he would take a taxi to go to his work. Seeing that, Sideron told Hawu to hand her his phone, and as expected of her power, she managed to charge the battery instantly. Yule was so amazed by her power, so Sideron explained that it was usually her job to charge up high-voltage transformers. Hawu thanked her, but she told her not to worry about it and gave Hawu a very suspicious expression. He then bid them farewell and went to work while the three Espers listened to his call to his boss. Apparently, despite the whole city going into shambles, Hawu's office was fine, so he had to show up. Moments later, Hawu talked to Yule and he commended him for being a great driver. Yule had no car of his own, but driving was a piece of cake for him. It was then revealed that the car belonged to Taishik, which made Hawu feel bad for him. Yule then looked at Hawu and told him that operating machines was easier than using his powers. Just then, Yule dropped Hawu off at his office, but before that, Yule turned to Hawu and looked at him romantically. Yule leaned closer to Hawu and he blushed so hard again upon seeing his face move closer inch by inch. Hawu slowly closed his eyes, only to find out that Yule was only removing his seatbelt. The twink NPC felt too embarrassed, so Yule laughed at him. Hawu then moved out of the car, feeling a little annoyed at Yule. Just then, Do-hyun texted him about the news, which Hawu knew already. It turned out that Do-hyun's parents received a call from the bureau because, apparently, several of its researchers had run away. Do-hyun seemed disappointed with Hawu's reaction, but Hawu seemed unsure how to react. He was asking on behalf of his parents, who received an offer to work for the bureau. That said, Hawu told him that he would ask Yule about it. When Do-hyun started throwing shade at Yule, Hawu remained speechless, and he wanted to inform him that he had become a guide, but decided not to. Hawu then found himself torn about how to reveal the truth to Do-hyun. Nonetheless, Hawu decided not to tell him at all, and told him that Yule would pick him up after work. That said, Do-hyun told him that if he really liked him, he would not stop him. Hawu then read Do-hyun's final message about giving them both good luck for their relationship. The twink NPC thanked him, and he put his phone down. Hawu once again wondered if he really liked Yule, or if he was even doing the right thing. Apparently, the only reason why Hawu kept pushing Yule away was that Yule was an Esper while he was just a civilian. However, since he could guide him from then on, Hawu believed that it should be fine. However, he could not stop asking himself if he genuinely liked Yule. The sun was setting, and Hawu was about to go home when suddenly he saw Yule standing outside waiting for him. Yule asked him about his work, and Hawu thanks him for picking him up. Yule opened the door for him and told him that he would drive him home. Hawu looked at him with innocent eyes and smiled at then kept him with a sweet smile. Just then they left, and Hawu asked if he had the AC on, explaining that he got so cold easily. Yule then told him that he would keep that in mind before revealing that the aircon was off. That said, Hawu felt awkward thinking that he might have offended Yule. On the other hand, Yule simply smiled at Hawu, making Hawu feel guilty even more. Nonetheless, Yule told him that in that way they could both stay cool in the summer, and he could give him his coat in the winter. Hawu told Yule that getting hot easily wasn't really the problem, so he asked if he had a summer uniform. Yule, however, revealed that he was wearing that uniform in any season. They continued talking about the possibility that Yule would become the new minister of the bureau. However, that responsibility carried a lot of tasks too, like different uniforms for different seasons, and getting rid of the wall around the bureau. Yule then told him that he would know about his plans when he became the new minister. Just then, Yule announced that they were home, which happened to be their apartment, which Yule really missed. Yule and Haopo continued talking as he parked the car. Haopo gave a deep sigh, asking Yule if he could hit him just once, so he bowed his head, confusing Haopo in the process. Yule willingly agreed to his request, making Haopo wonder why he was not saying anything. Haopo then told Yule that he liked someone who knew how to take care of themselves, and he was hoping that he would do the same. The twink NPC clarified that what he was saying is that Yule aced of those criteria. Yule blushed so hard, followed by a genuine laugh because his efforts were not in vain. Later on, they prepared a lot of food to share together, making Haopo notice that it had been a while since they had dinner together. Haopo appreciated the taste of the food, telling Yule that he could be a chef with his great skills. He then noticed that Yule opened the window and the air that flowed inside was so refreshing. Haopo then suggested that would make some noise as well, because he was way too quiet. Yule then suggested they make some noise together, so Yule agreed to their talking time. Time had passed and it was time for them to part ways, so Haopo thanked him for the dinner. Yule called him and Haopo happily responded, when suddenly Yule pulled him closer, asking him for a sleepover. Haopo started blushing so hard as Yule asked him to spend the night with him. Haopo was caught off guard by the sudden invitation, so Yule explained that they should sleep over at his place. The twink NPC then reiterated that he was just living next door. But Yule used his teary eyes to convince him. Haopo couldn't seem to say no to him, making Yule feel very happy. Later on, Haopo was dreaming about a blue ocean that shone greatly. In his dream, an unknown hand was touching his face, fixing his buttons and patting his shoulder. Normally, Haopo woke up after the hand touched him, so he was confused why his dream continued. Just then, Haopo noticed that where he stood was a dimension, and that something grabbed his Excalibur. Howie's blushed as he was begging for the unknown to let go of the grip. Yule jolted awake from his dream, completely weirded out by the randomness of his dream. Looking around him, he came to the realization that he was not at home and that he was sleeping beside Yule. As Howie tried to reach his face, he wondered why he hadn't realized how good-looking Yule was. Howie began touching Yule's face when suddenly he bit his finger before asking him how long he'd been awake. Yule wanted him to wake him up using a different way of waking him up, apart from his finger. The GigaChat hunk then rizzes the twink NPC by leaning closer and making him blush. Moments later, Howie's guessed that Yule loved biting people, so Yule assured him that he liked doing it to him. Yule asked Howie to be patient with him as he was a first-timer in almost everything. Howie started feeling hot about Yule's invitation. Nonetheless, Howie told Yule that he needed to go home, so when he opened Yule's door, he was shocked to see Yule's smiling face. Howie refused Yule's offer, but the GigaChat hunk insisted on doing it anyway. He also reminded Howie that he had left his pager watch and told him to make sure it was charged and to carry it at all times. When Howie looked at his pager watch, he heard the voice of Yule calling out to him. Howie explained that using the pager watch made him feel a bit nervous, so he suggested using his phone instead. Yule then revealed what happened to his phone, so Howie realized that it must have been taken away from him during the incident. The two then walked along each other and they talked about Yule's desire. Moments later, on the rooftop of the building, Howie was ringing his dad's number. Howie talked to him to check how he was, so his father assured him that he was totally fine. Unfortunately, his dad seemed to have trust issues with the Espers. That said, Howie talked to his dad and told him that he wanted him to meet his friend. Howie then informed his dad about him changing his phone number and assured him that he would call him very soon. Just then, Howie recalled his sweet moment with Yule, who clung to him like a baby. Meanwhile, Howie was wondering if everything would be okay. One day, a scared seller handed over the latest phone model to Yule, who seemed interested in buying one. The GigaChat hunk looked at the phone and recalled his conversation with Hao-Hu about matching phone numbers. While Hao-Hu was also thinking about it, Yule suddenly appeared before him, bringing two phones for them, which shocked Hao-Hu. When Hao-Hu questioned him about buying two phones, Yule fell silent. That said, the GigaChat hunk leaned closer to him and asked for Hao-Hu's phone. Yule smiled despite Hao-Hu's disapproval of having the same mobile phone as him. Just then, Yule looked at Hao-Hu's phone and crushed it before apologizing as if it was not intended. Being caught off guard, Hao-Hu could only cry as Yule bought two new mobile phones for them. After processing the payment receipts, the two received two matching mobile phones. Hao-Hu, on the other hand, became worried as they might accidentally mix up with each other's phone. Soon enough, Yule called out Hao-Hu for spacing out and asked him which number he wanted for both of them. Hao-Hu asked if it had to be the same number, so Yule confirmed it to him. Hao-Hu began scratching numbers and Yule watched him carefully, then happily told him he would go with his suggestion. Yule easily figured out that the chosen numbers of Hao-Hu were their birth dates and had their numbers prepared for them. Moments later, outside the mall, Yule was looking at his phone with Hao-Hu as his sole contact person. Yule then began talking about Hao-Hu's upcoming birthday and how he wanted to celebrate it with him. While looking at Yule, Hao-Hu suddenly became sad at the thought of visiting his dad. It turned out that back when he was younger, Hao-Hu came home drenched in rain. He saw his father getting drunk in the kitchen, and Hao-Hu revealed that his birthday always happened during the rainy season. It was also near the death date of his mother, so it became meaningless to him. Back at the present, Hao-Hu told Yule that he would not visit his father on his birthday. Yule agreed with him after carefully listening to his story. Hao-Hu then asked him if they could go on a date the next day, so Yule happily agreed and told him that there was a place that he wanted to go with him. The twink NPC asked him where they were going, but Yule told him that it would be a surprise. They held hands and Yule assured Hao-Hu that the place was exactly what he needed. Moments later, they met an old GigaChad named Sei, and he introduced himself as the head of the training school. Hao-Hu became confused big time, and Sei thought that he had no idea why he had been brought there. When they sat all together, Hao-Hu started punching Yule, who pleaded not to get mad at him. Yule then used his teary-eyed face card to calm Hao-Hu and explained to him that it was actually very important. Soon enough, Yule talked to Sei about teaching Hao-Hu the basics of self-defense. Sei asked him why he did not want him to teach Hao-Hu any guiding, and Yule only replied with his glaring blue eyes. Realizing the situation, Sei decided to sip his drink and stay quiet. Sei agreed with Yule's order, so he only required Hao-Hu to come during the weekends only. Yule then showed Hao-Hu around where some espers and guides were sparring as part of their training. Yule told Hao-Hu that he was taken there when he was 9 years old and trained there until he was 20. The GigaChad hunk then sadly told Hao-Hu he had no family when asked whether he missed them. Hearing that, Hao-Hu felt sad and assured him that there was someone who missed him. Yule then lifted their hands and told him that it would be nice that way. Everyone stopped sparring when they saw Yule kiss Hao-Hu's hand. Yule noticed them, so he called Hao-Hu, leaned closer and whispered to him that all espers were animals. Hao-Hu blushed and at the same time was shocked by his revelation. That said, Yule then told him to be careful. To Yule, whether it was out of pity or love, he only cared about Hao-Hu liking him. He could feel Haohu's sweet emotions through the imprint, and he was not letting anyone else have him, expressing his strong desire and his possessive nature. Yule wanted to complete the imprint, but if that happened, Haohu would know about his ugly feelings towards him. That said, Yule wondered how much of him Haohu was willing to accept, and if he would still love him the same after knowing his true self. The following day, Haohu and Yule were dating outside, and Haohu put Yule's meat inside his mouth, enjoyed every bit of it, and chugged it down his throat. Meanwhile, Yule was just sitting there smiling as he watched him savor his tasty meat. Haohu then brought up about him learning self-defense in the Bureau's school. They then talked about the training and compared it to a light exercise. Haohu doubted it considering Yule was an Esper, so Yule told him that he was no longer sure himself. The GigaChad hunk then told him to train hard or develop his stamina, telling him that it was a fun activity. Yule told him that what really matters is that he would have records of him training there. Just then, Yule stopped and looked directly at Haohu before gently smiling and wiping the food crumbs on his face and eating it himself. Moments later, the two went their way to the facility, where they shared conversations and laughs along the way. Upon entering the main entrance, Haohu was left dumbfounded by what he saw. The place was filled with frames that contained pictures of Espers and guides who had served humanity ever since. Haohu then stopped at the photo where the three S-class Espers shared one frame. As usual, the twink NPC was staring at Yule's handsome younger self in the photo and wondered why he was barely smiling at the photos. Haohu then pulled out his new phone and pulled Yule's face closer to him, before telling him to lean toward him a little lower. Haohu then snapped a photo of them together, where Yule was showing a bright, warm smile. Seeing that, Yule asked him to send the photo to him because it looked cute. Haohu, on the other hand, was pissed by the fact that his shot became blurred and wanted to take another one. However, Yule stopped him from doing so and begged him to send it to him. The GigaChad hunk snatched the phone from Haohu, who was obviously mad. Yule then asked Haohu if he would delete it, which he confirmed. Nonetheless, Yule still sent it to him and told Haohu that he looked cute in it. After receiving the photo, Yule saw Do-hyun's message, making Yule's mood shift in an instant. That said, Haohu remembered that Do-hyun was waiting for his reply. Just then, Yule asked Haohu who the guy Do-hyun was talking about. Haohu was caught off guard, so he admitted that Do-hyun was referring to him. Realizing the situation, Yule asked him if there was something that Haohu wanted to ask him. Haohu then told Yule that Do-hyun's parents were actually researchers, admitting that he promised Do-hyun that he would ask him whether to let them accept the offer or not, which Yule approved. The two talked about the researchers in the Bureau, where Yule revealed that if they were invited, it would mean they were very talented. Haohu let a sigh of relief and assured Yule that Do-hyun's parents were definitely good people. Not long after, Haohu entered the school for his self-defense training, where Yule showed him several pieces of gym equipment. Yule assured him that staying there for 2 months should be enough to register him as a guide in the Bureau. Yule then showed him the newest exercise machine, when suddenly, Haohu asked him what he would do after being registered as a guide. The GigaChad hunk was left speechless, so he revealed to Haohu that he arranged everything for him to always be by his side. Then he told Haohu that he needed to qualify as a guide so he could let him debut as his guide. Hearing that, Haohu thought that he could finally help Yule as a guide while recalling their sweet moments together. Little did they know, someone with purple hair was watching over them. Meanwhile, Haohu thought of his past convo with Yule about a very unique Esper that had a good sync rate with him. That said, Haohu agreed to do his best and qualify as a guide. Seeing his newfound determination, Yule couldn't help but laugh at his cuteness. Just then, the two of them promised to always keep their words to each other. The two went straight to Sa for Haohu to start his training that day. Right away, he started lifting the contract and read the terms and conditions in order to improve his twink body. Soon enough, Haohu started yelling after seeing Yule's name as his instructor, so Sa asked him what the problem was. Haohu told him that Yule was his assigned instructor, which Sa confirmed right away. Yule did not waste any time, and he proceeded to sign the contract. Just after he signed the contract, Yule told Haohu to sign it too, before giving him a suspicious smile. Yule then told him that he would help him train for the next 2 months. The two engaged in a conversation talking about why he took the trainer's job, so Yule told him that he would not leave him alone in that place. The twink NPC looked him in the eye and the two engaged in a staring contest. Yule then smiled at him and took Haohu's hand as a sign that the two of them agreed on the contract. Haohu smiled back and the two of them went straight to the training room. Moments later, Haohu was gasping a breath as sweat was flowing all over his body. But Haohu seemed determined to do his best, making Yule feel proud of him. Not long after, Haohu collapsed and hugged the ground, so he lay his back on the floor and started panting heavily from exhaustion. His eyes, though, showed no sign of giving up, so Yule offered his hand to help him stand up again. Haohu then grabbed Yule's necktie and told Yule to let him lie down just a little more. Haohu's mood then shifted and he pressed his hand to the floor beside Haohu's face. Yule wanted Haohu to come closer to his face, so he lay his body on top of him. Their eyes met and the two of them felt the strong desire to kiss each other. As their lips were ready for another cycle, Yule's hand locked in Haohu's. Just then, Haohu stopped him from escalating things into plot development. However, Yule was not in the mood to listen, so he dug in for another one. Haoru freed himself from his grip and the liquid in their mouth started flowing. The GigaChad hunk was blushing from the heated momentum, so he kissed Haoru's forehead and cheeks before kissing his ears. Haoru dropped unconscious after that, and Yule told him that he needed to take a shower. Their eyes met again, and Haoru immediately felt awkward for what they had done. Yule then gave him his predatory glare, but Haoru simply gave him a teasing smile. That said, Yule started pouting like a child before Haoru leaned closer to him to tell him that he would take a shower. Yule watched him go away, and Yule realized that Haoru was finally his lover and his guide. In the shower room, Haoru was washing his body properly, and the water started dripping from his body. Meanwhile, Yule lay down on the floor, and he listened to Haoru taking a shower. While the twink NPC was taking a shower, Yule put his hand on the light of the ceiling, as he controlled himself from developing a plot with Haoru. The next day, Haoru went back to work, and he felt energized from his workout. He then gave a sigh of relief from not having to drag an exhausted body to his work. However, his mind kept flashing back to the intimate moment that Yule and he shared. Just then, Haoru asked Kim if there was something he didn't understand, but he seemed to be fixated on something else, so he told him that everything was fine. Seeing his reaction, Haoru wondered if he regretted lending him his cushion. Just then, it was already 6:05 p.m. and Haoru quickly logged out from his computer and grabbed his bag before thanking Kim for lending him his cushion. Haoru then left, leaving Kim to sniffle for his dear cushion. As Haoru exited the building, he was exchanging text messages with Yule. That said, he dialed Yule's number and asked why he suddenly wanted to pack his lunch. Yule told Haoru that he already bought a lunchbox for it. Haoru finally exited the building, and he was looking left and right searching for Taishik's car. Meanwhile, Yule was inside the car, and he told Haoru to simply follow the ice that reached his feet. While talking over the phone, Yule asked him to guess what he bought for the first time. Soon enough, Haoru reached his destination, where there was a brand new car. After knocking on the window, it opened, and Yule told him he bought a new car so he would stop taking the subway. The GigaChad hunk winked at him, telling him that he felt disappointed back then. The two were stopped by the traffic light, so Yule asked Haoru if he was just okay from his training. He told him to tell him everything that needed to be changed in his training routine. Haoru then told him that there's nothing to worry about before asking Yule if a donut cushion could help ease muscle pain. While listening to Haoru, Yule could not help but laugh before guessing that he was referring to Kim. Realizing it himself, Haoru became so shy about it, thinking that Kim thought he had hemorrhoids. That said, Haoru told Yule that Kim got the wrong idea before shifting the conversation to Yule wanting to make lunch for him. Yule simply told him that he just wanted to do it for him, making Haoru fall for him even more. Haoru then thought of Yule's unconditional love for him, making it very impossible not to give his heart to him. When the stoplight turned green, Haoru thanked Yule. The very next day, Haoru opened a we-made packed lunch, which surprised him a lot. His red-haired female workmate wondered why he had been packing lunch lately. As she opened his food, Haoru revealed to her that his boyfriend insisted on packing his lunch. Hearing that, she became so shocked that he dropped her sandwich. She then began interrogating Haoru, making him feel embarrassed. Just then, she asked Haoru if he was not upset considering that his boyfriend was an Esper who needed a guide. Haoru made it clear to her that he was just alright before recalling what Seda told Yule about not teaching any guiding to Haoru. He then wondered if Yule wanted him to register as a guide but did not want him to learn how to do it. Just then, the red-haired girl snapped him back to reality before expressing how jealous she was of him. The twink NPC continued wondering about it, so he chatted with Yule, who seemed very busy. That said, he decided to contact someone who could help him in his situation. The following day, Haoru went to a nearby coffee shop and he sat there patiently waiting for the person he had invited. Just then, the door opened and Haoru happily waved his hand to the person. It was no other than Sibion, who happily smiled back at Haoru before asking why he wanted to see her. While Sibion wondered if Haoru needed some advice from a friend, Wei-Chan arrived at the same cafe along with his guide, Jian-Woo. Haoru then wondered if Sibion had invited them as well, which she confirmed, since their workplace was just nearby. The four of them sat at the table where Wei-Chan began getting clingy to Jian-Woo, his personal guide. Jian-Woo introduced himself to Haoru, and Haoru did the same thing. Just then, Haoru dropped the bomb about his concern about being a guide, which shocked both Wei-Chan and Sibion. Luckily, Wei-Chan brought Jian-Woo, who can answer anything about guides. Wei-Chan explained that even though they were Espers, their knowledge about guides was limited. That said, Jian-Woo asked Haoru what he wanted to know. Haoru admitted that he only became a guide recently, which means that his abilities manifested late. Jian-Woo then asked if he was staying in the training school and wondered how Safe was doing lately. Haoru told him that he was not sure because he was not staying in the school. Jian-Woo then wondered how he was being trained to be a guide. That said, Haoru admitted that it was the very reason why he wanted to meet up with them. Realizing the situation, Jian-Woo decided to help him, so he asked him to grab his hand for a moment and Haoru did so. Jian-Woo taught him the basic form of guiding, which Haoru tried to learn properly. Suddenly, He felt an electrifying sensation flow from his hand, shocking him in the process as the pain traveled throughout his body. Seeing that, Jianwu became speechless and wondered whether Haowu was really a guide. They then discussed Haowu's ability as a guide, which Jianwu would like to verify again. However, Seom arrived and told Jianwu that Haowu was indeed a guide. The four of them sat together and had their drinks, when suddenly, Haowu noticed a spare cup of coffee. Seom then revealed that she ordered the coffee for Yule, who was about to arrive any moment. Just then, they all looked at him with his dazzling princely arrival, and Seon found his action really romantic. Yule then entered the cafe and approached their table. The GigaChad hunk sat beside Haowu and smiled after asking if he was not intruding on them. Yule asked them what they were talking about, so Jianwu started the conversation. Yule sipped his coffee and put it down before touching Haowu's finger. The GigaChad hunk took the opportunity to riz Haowu by kissing his hand. Jianwu could not believe that Yule finally had a guide, so he asked Yule if he was aware of Haowu's condition. Yule smiled and assured him that he knew more than anyone else, so Jianwu gave him the opportunity to confess the truth. Yule then tapped his cup and apologized to Haowu first for keeping the truth away from him. Haowu seemed confused by what Yule was talking about, so Yule revealed that he really did become a guide, but only because his path opened because of his energy. That said, Yule explained that his ability did not manifest naturally, which made Haowu wonder when his path had opened. Yule revealed that it happened during their first meeting, which made Haowu realize why weird things had been happening to him since that day. Having said that, Haowu realized that Yule set him up to be his guide, and he was saddened by all the lies. Yule wiped Haowu's tears, admitting that he had approached him on purpose. The GigaChad hunk knew that Haowu might no longer believe him, so Yule explained that because of what happened to him, he was not the same with any guides. The Twink NPC could not draw in Esper's energy, which he could only do reverse guiding. Sigurd explained that reverse guiding was done against the guide's will, meaning the Esper would control the guiding, which allowed the Esper to use the guide's body like a tool. Sion then asked How if he was wondering why Yule hid it from him, which made Hawa wonder if he was so easy to read. Sion then looked at Yule and told Hawa that he should hear it from Yule himself. While many people passed by outside the coffee shop, Yule began his explanation. Apparently, Hawa looked right at him with no hesitation and didn't think of him as a monster. Hawa then thought that he felt that way only because he became a guide. Yule assured him that was not the case at all, and that he would never lie to him because that was the line he would never cross. Hawa listened to Yule as he explained how he was so greedy at first because he wanted to spend more time with him, only to hold back when the moment came. When Hawa asked him what he was afraid of, Yule told him that he got scared that he would leave him. Hearing that, Hawa felt bad for him because it felt like the GOAT top G in the world knelt before the most common NPC in the world. It almost felt like Yule had a desperate look on his face and he was willing to kiss Hawa's hand and foot just for him not to abandon him. Hawa then wondered if what he was feeling towards Yule was love. But either way, Hawa patted his face and told him that all he needed to do was to apologize. Hawa then hugged Yule, and the GigaChad hunk felt a strong urge to hug him back, making the three other people around feel like they were watching a BL drama. Hawa apologized for involving them in his mess, but Cian assured him it was not a big deal at all. Cian expressed his delight at witnessing a helpless Yule. Just then, Cian stood up and answered the call for her to go back to work. But before leaving, Cian told Yule that even he could not stop all the rain that was going to fall. Yule asked her if that was a warning, but Cian assured him that she was just giving him advice. Cian further told Yule that even if he tried to shield the precious people in his life, they would still get drenched in the rain. Soon enough, Yunshin and Gyeonwoo bid them farewell, leaving only the two of them behind. Yule and Halwoo were fidgeting on the table when suddenly, the GigaChad hunk asked Halwoo if he wanted to see the ocean. Halwoo was speechless, but Yule offered his hand and told him that the ocean might help him sort things out, so Halwoo agreed to do so. Moments later, the ocean breeze was running freely, and the two stood before a majestic sunset. As they stood beside each other, Halwoo felt the breeze run through his body and smiled because it was not what he expected at all. It turned out that when Halwoo was still in school, he watched a documentary about the ocean and learned how beautiful it was on the surface, but monsters lived within its depths. Halwoo then looked at Yule and wondered if Yule was like an ocean. The Twink NPC then asked Yule if guides do not like his reverse guiding, which Yule confirmed. He looked at Yule in the eye and told him that guides absolutely hated it. As the ocean breeze continued, the two talked about how a normal civilian could become a guide. Yule then riz him again, telling him how special he was. He admitted that he was so desperate to hide it, explaining that the Bureau was not really respecting the rights of all the Espers and guides, and that they were conducting experiments with them. Hearing all that, Halwoo became too stunned to speak. Realizing that the Bureau did it to Yule as well, Halwoo clenched his fist in anger. Seeing him get upset by what happened, Yule held his face and tapped his forehead, telling him not to be sad in that place. Yule then told Halwoo that if he liked the ocean, he should focus on it at that moment. Halwoo became speechless as he wondered when he told him he liked the ocean. Moments later, at Hao's apartment, he was drying his hair from taking a shower when he chatted with Do-hyun, who immediately asked him if he wanted to crack some booze. Hao then looked at the couch and realized that he did not really want to have Do-hyun over at his place at that moment. That said, Hao insisted that he would be the one to go to his place, which surprised Do-hyun because that was not their usual routine. Nonetheless, Do-hyun agreed on his decision. Hao told him that he would be ready to go in 10 minutes, while Do-hyun told him that he would get the beer. After getting ready, Hao pressed the elevator button to go to the ground floor. While waiting for it to open, he was thinking of his wrist, which felt a little bare without his pager watch. However, he felt awkward about wearing it to Do-hyun's place even though he was not going there to do anything bad. Hao thought that it should be fine not to wear the pager watch for a while, when suddenly his phone received a notification, which was a message from Yule. Hao wondered if it was just a coincidence, so he quickly turned around to check if he was being spied on. The twink NPC knew to himself that he came out quietly, but he was considering the fact that perhaps Yule had heard him because the timing was a little suspicious. Meanwhile, inside Yule's apartment, it was dead silent, and only the splash of a dripping water was heard. Upon listening to the door, the steps, and the notification sound of Hao, Yule figured out that he was going to see Do-hyun. That said, he started chatting with Hao, but he simply typed his name. Yule seemed unhappy with the situation, and his emotions began to manifest as energy around him. He even asked Hao through chat not to be too late. The GigaChat hunk continued chatting with Hao with a sad vibe because he was not comfortable not having Hao within his reach. That said, he started calling someone over the phone as he moved to the balcony of his apartment. The ringing continued as he looked outside the apartment. It turned out that he was looking for the walking Hao outside the apartment complex. Someone answered the call, and it was no other than Esper Moon, and at that moment, Yule gave a sly smile. Suddenly, rain started pouring down along the way, and Hao reached the bus stop. Upon exiting the bus, an umbrella was raised above his head to protect him from getting soaked in the rain. It was none other than Do-hyun, who happily fetched Hao from the bus stop, telling Hao that he had arrived at the perfect moment. Just then, Do-hyun gave Hao his spare clear umbrella for him to use, which surprised Hao low-key because he was just about to tell him to bring one. Do-hyun asked him what was going on, so Hao admitted that he was dating Yule. Hao wondered why he seemed not surprised at all, so Do-hyun revealed that he kind of anticipated it already. Do-hyun explained to Hao why he thought that way, but Hao seemed oblivious about it. He even pointed out that it was obvious since they were still hanging out together after what happened, which made sense to Hao. As they go to Do-hyun's place, the rain continued pouring down. Moments later, the two were a little drunk from chugging down some booze down their throat, and Do-hyun told Hao to slow down his drinking. Do-hyun then wondered why Hao was acting that way when he should be happy that he and Yule had just started dating. Hao thought of the same thing, so he released a deep breath and fell face down at the table, making Do-hyun wonder what the problem could be. Do-hyun started interrogating Hao, asking if Yule cheated, if he dumped him, or if he was a two-timer. Hao denied all of his accusations as he looked at his reflection in the glass of booze and admitted that he became a guide. Do-hyun then wondered how on earth Hao became a guide, so Hao looked at him and decided to tell the truth. After the revelation, Do-hyun dropped his glass of booze out of disbelief. He then stood up and yelled at Hao, telling him that Yule clearly approached him on purpose, making Hao wonder why he thought so. Do-hyun was mad about what he just learned, and he started pointing out all of Yule's suspicious actions, explaining why Espers could not be trusted, before chugging down his booze like a wild animal. However, Do-hyun's mood turned serious, and he asked Hao why he was letting him get away with what he did. Hao then clinked his glass of booze and told Do-hyun that he already had fallen for him. The twink NPC became speechless, and his expression says a lot about how confused he was. That said, Do-hyun stood up again and asked Hao if it was just really okay with him. When Hao asked him what he meant, Do-hyun brought up Hao's dad, who hated Espers so much. Do-hyun also pointed out that his dad hated guides as well, making Hao become speechless. He then asked Hao what he was going to do, but Hao revealed that he had no idea at all. While the picture of Hao and his mom appeared in Hao's memory, he was thinking that his mother's death might have something to do with the Espers. Hao could not hide this from his father forever, but he knew that he could not just tell him that he had become a guide on the anniversary of his mother's death. Hao revealed that he would go and visit his father to see how he was doing, so Do-hyun asked him if he wanted him to go along. The twink NPC appreciated Do-hyun's offer, and the two decided to continue drinking. Hao revealed that he would sleep over at Do-hyun's place and told him to prepare some toiletries for him, which Do-hyun reluctantly agreed to. Meanwhile, at Yule's apartment complex, he was talking to Moon about a specific address that he would give. While Yule was talking to him, he commanded Moon to go there and keep an eye on Hao and just let him know if there would be some problems. When Moon asked him if all he wanted him to do was just to inform him, Yule coldly asked him if he was allowed to ask questions of him. That said, Moon asked Yule how long he should follow him instead. Meanwhile, Yule was in deep thought about something else, thinking about himself, waiting to see if it would turn out to be a short or long battle. Kim Dongchul may have stepped down now, but he had been in power in that city for over a decade, so it would be dangerous to underestimate him. Nonetheless, he told Moon he would find out later, since all he wanted him to do was watch over Haohu, and he was excused from his Esper job, which Moon agreed to. Just then, Yule started using his pager watch and expressed how hurt he was that he had left it at home. Yule's eyes showed sadness, and when he closed his eyes, his mood changed, telling himself that before he reunited with Haohu, he wanted to ignore the imprint on purpose. However, Yule seemed to have decided on something as he gave a sly smile, telling himself that he wouldn't have to hold back anymore. Yule pictured the image of Dahyun and Haohu walking under the rain, telling himself that no matter where Haohu was in that city, he could find him. The Gigachad hunk was sure that Haohu would not like it if he found out that he had already imprinted on him, and he might not even love him anymore if he found out how it happened. However, Yule no longer cared about love because all he wanted was for Haohu not to think he was a monster, and not to push him away. At that moment, Yule thought about the day that was about to come, and it was a new beginning for him, but a nightmare for Haohu that he had forgotten about. In the past, while they stayed in Yule's place in the middle of the night, a young Haohu told Yule that he liked the ocean and that they should go together. Yule agreed to Haohu, and they looked at the book that had waves and seagulls. Just then, someone knocked on the door, and it was none other than Haohu's mother, who came asking if Haohu was bothering Yule. The two kids looked at her, and Yule assured her that Haohu was not bothering him, and Yule pointed out that she got off work early that day. Haohu dashed towards his mother, who told Yule that she had prepared a dinner for him and would like him to eat it. Meanwhile, a jolly Haohu told his mother that he and Yule decided to go to the ocean together, asking if she should come with them as well. His mother told him that he couldn't go to the ocean because it was too dangerous, making Haohu feel sad because the picture book said it was amazing and that they should all go together. Seeing him like that, Haohu's mother reluctantly agreed, making Haohu happy again, as he told Yule that her mother would come with them too. Meanwhile, Yule was speechless upon witnessing their mother and son relationship, which he envied so much. Yule's eye turned purple, and he wondered if his hypnosis had grown weaker, so he tried to use it by force, only to feel strangely weak and painful. Seeing him like that, Haohu quickly freed himself from his mother's grip to go for Yule, which shocked his mother as well. Yule knew that it was a different kind of pain that he had never felt before. As his body trembled, he knew that it was not the same pain he felt after using a lot of energy, and he felt like he was bursting with energy. At that moment, Yule unleashed a very powerful magical energy that manifested as water and ice, freezing everything around them. Haohu's mother hugged him to protect him from the impact of the strong magical surge. At that very moment, Haohu was horrified upon witnessing Yule's ice magic that engulfed the whole area. In an instant, the whole mansion froze, and the bureau started investigating the area. They entered the frozen mansion, and the cold breeze welcomed them. Inside Yule's room, the mother and son were lying unconscious on the frozen floor, while Yule looked at them to see if they were just fine. Yule's face started freezing as well while he called Haohu's name. He was trying to reach out to him, but Haohu was unconsciously lying in her mother's arms. Just then, someone from the bureau wearing a yellow suit arrived and witnessed the scene. Haohu looked at him with his angry blue eyes, making the person flinch by just his mere glare. The man contacted his fellow investigators and revealed their location. The person informed the investigation team that the boy's guard was too high, so he would try to talk to him and bring him down, but his fellows knew it would be dangerous. He told them that they should not have brought him there if they were too worried for him, before his fellow told him that he was just a trainee who had not even graduated yet. Meanwhile, the person admitted that it was his fault that he had sneaked him there, but he was sure that he would do just fine. Amidst the situation, Haohu was heavily breathing from too much cold, and the person told Yule that if he left him like that, his friend would die before introducing himself as Taishik, a healer. Taishik confirmed whether the power belonged to him. Soon after, Taishik moved closer to the mother and son. As he removed Haohu from his deceased mother, he was thinking that the explosion was too powerful, that it had razed half the city to the ground, so it was a miracle that the boy was still alive. Just then, spikes of ice appeared before him, and Taishik told him that he did not care even if the child would die. However, Taishik pointed out that, unlike him, Yule cared about the child. Hearing that, Yule calmed himself down, and Taishik used his power to heal Haohu. However, while healing him, he suddenly stopped and wondered what was going on with Haohu's body before realizing that the kid's body had completely changed inside. Taishik felt chills down his spine upon witnessing such action. He then asked Yule what on earth he had done, but he simply stood before him like an emotionless puppet. Yule remained silent, and his ominous glare at Taishik continued. At that moment, Taishik looked at Yule, and he knew that it was not a matter that he could handle on his own. Just then, Yule asked what would happen if the people below them saw Haohu, making Taishik become speechless for a while. Nonetheless, Taishik looked at Haohu's body and lifted it, thinking that the situation was just too unfortunate. Taeshik knew that since he was not a guide nor an Esper, he would become a lab rat for the Bureau for the rest of his life. Taeshik told Yule that there was nothing good that would happen to him if that were to happen. His colleague asked him what happened, and Taeshik told him to just get there and take a look at himself because he couldn't explain it with words. Just then Yule cast a magic on Hawu, where a glowing line bound their body together. Yule asked Hawu if it was him whom he was afraid of. At that very moment, Yule felt that his connection with Hawu was very faint, so he stroked his forehead and asked him again if he was afraid of him. As Yule could fear that Hawu was feeling, Taeshik's fellow wondered what had happened to his confidence about calming the child down. Yule continued staring at Hawu as the glowing line continued binding them. Taeshik's fellow told him that he would go to him after taking care of the stuff below. Meanwhile, the feeling of being connected to Hawu felt dreadfully satisfying for him. Just then, Yule coldly declared that Hawu was his from then on. Taeshik did not like his fellow's lack of urgency, and when he turned his back again, he jolted upon seeing a monster like Yule, asking him what he was staring at. He bravely moved closer to Yule, who was asking why Taeshik stopped talking and what would happen to Hawu. Taeshik informed Yule that Hawu would be sent to the lab, making Yule feel bad for what he did. Soon after, Yule asked Taeshik what would happen to him, so Taeshik informed him that when an Esper manifested, they would be sent to the training school regardless of their age. Taeshik further explained that Yule would also live there under the Bureau's supervision. Yule then asked Taeshik why Hawu was not coming with him, and why he would be sent to a lab. Taeshik then told him that it was due to the fact that Hawu had turned into something strange. He further explained that Hawu was neither an Esper nor a guide, and on top of that, he was no longer a normal civilian anymore. That said, Taeshik asked Yule what else they could use to describe Hawu other than strange. Taeshik told Yule that he would love to save Hawu, but he had neither power nor authority to do so. Yule then mumbled the word power to Taeshik before asking him if he would help him. Taeshik asked him what he could help him with, and Yule revealed that he would like to hide Hawu. However, Taeshik apologized to him for having no power to do what Yule wanted for Hawu. Yule, on the other hand, insisted that he had the ability to do so, and at that moment Taeshik reconsidered. As other people reached their location, Yule told Taeshik that he could sense 13 people running upstairs, and reiterated that he had the power. Yule knew to himself that it was his first time to control that many people at once, and if Taeshik refused to help, he would make him the 14th person. Taeshik groaned and Yule asked him if he would help him. He could only let out a heavy sigh and agreed to cooperate with Yule. Yule then only requested that he bring Hawu home safely, which confused Taeshik greatly. Meanwhile, Yule simply smiled genuinely after telling him his request. Not long after, someone opened the door and the person seemed surprised by what he witnessed, while Taeshik told him to come over. Behind him were two guys in complete gear, and with a grin he sighed at the sight of an even bigger mess. The man noticed that they were just kids and wondered why there were only two of them. Seeing him, Yule hugged Hawu tightly, while Taeshik awkwardly tried to explain the situation. Just then, Yule's eyes turned purple, and he activated his mind control power against all of them, making Taeshik stop him from doing so. Meanwhile, the team leader laughed at Yule, mocking his ability, and telling him that it won't work against him. However, after a few seconds, his defenses were penetrated, and his body stopped. While everyone was under Yule's mind control, Taeshik couldn't believe his eyes that a child could break through an A-class Esper's mental barrier. Yule told Taeshik that he would deny his presence there if anyone asked, and asked him to take Hawu home using the address he would give him. Yule knew that it was not yet the right time to keep Hawu by his side, so he did what he thought would be best for Hawu. Then, he kissed Hawu's forehead and promised that he would come to get him soon. Not long after, Taeshik took away Hawu, and in the middle of that chilling night he walked away from that frozen area. However, before that happened, Yule used his power to delete those bad memories from Hawu's mind, and used his magic to mind control the others into believing that Taeshik was never with him. Then, he instilled in their mind that only one child was found at the scene. Using his power, he sealed all those suppressed and altered memories in all of their minds. Then, he wondered how long it would take for him and Hawu to meet again. Just then, the team leader turned back to reality and asked Yule if he was the one responsible for that commotion. Yule was not spitting a word, and the team leader realized by the color of his eyes and abilities that Yule was a water-type Esper, and acknowledged the fact that he was too powerful for his age. Then, he invited Yule to come with him as he promised he would find him a place to stay. 21 years have passed since then, and for Yule it felt like such a long time. As expected, Yule had become more than powerful enough over the years, and he eliminated everything and everyone that got in his way. It wasn't time wasted, but if he had stayed with Hawu since they were little, he would not have reached the level he was at present. Despite all that, it couldn't be helped because after all, he was the one who created that situation. Back at the present, Yule knocked on a door, and when it opened, he told him that he had come to pick him up as promised. The next morning, Hawu woke up with Do-hyun still having a hangover, and it was almost afternoon. Just then, the twink NPC asked if he had a deodorant spray for clothes, to which Do-hyun responded, Hawu then asked him if he could use some of it, and he told him that he could find it in the shoe closet. He even told Hawu that he could use the whole bottle if he wanted, but Hawu told him that he didn't need that much. After sniffing his shirt, he checked the time on his phone, and Do-hyun stood up, offering him a ride home. Do-hyun thought he was late, but Hawu assured him that the bus ride would be enough. However, Do-hyun opened the door and insisted on giving him a ride. Soon enough, the two arrived at Hawu's apartment, and Do-hyun left immediately after. While Hawu was still yawning as he walked, the GigaChad hunk was watching him from the balcony. He smiled at him, and the NPC Twink noticed him too. Just then, he leaned on the balcony for a jump, which shocked Hawu. The Rizlord then took the opportunity for his flashy descent before leaning over Hawu's neck like a hot vampire ready to suck in his liquid. As expected, clumsiness took over, and the Twink NPC fell like a Disney princess saved by his Prince Charming. Yul then looked at the time and told him to get ready ASAP because he would take him to his destination himself. Moments later, the two arrived at the facility, and Hawu's whole body quivered in fear. There, Jeonwoo asked him if he had gone home last night. Hearing that, Hawu looked at Yul, who was smiling at him genuinely. While he felt like something was off, Jeonwoo invited him to the gun training. Just then, Yul instantly turned into his cold mode upon seeing Jeonwoo holding his Twink NPC's hand. He gave him a deadly cold blank stare, which Hawu immediately noticed. Hawu knew that Yul was not having it, and Jeonwoo noticed it too. Soon after, they went to the training ground and joined the other Espers in gun training. The guides were all surprised that Yul was there, so one of them asked him why he was there. Yul then told him that his guide wanted to do some gun training before kissing him on the head in front of everyone. The GigaChad hunk felt genuinely happy for what he did, but the Twink NPC felt extremely awkward. The Esper then told Hawu to start the training already. Jeonwoo guided him on how to aim his shot, but Hawu seemed not ready to hold a real gun. Jeonwoo then told him that hands-on experience is the best before guiding him in handling his real gun. He then told Hawu about the machine producing sound waves that shield the city from monsters. He even explained that for someone like him who worked outside the city, self-defense is a must. Just then, Jeonwoo positioned his gun, ready to click it with straight aim, shooting several bullets at the head of the target. When he put down his gun and walked away, Hawu's posture was corrected by the other Esper, who instructed him on how to do it as he looked at the targets. And just like that, the Twink NPC activated his top G energy, ready to shoot his gun's load. The result is in, and Hawu managed not to shoot even a single target. Jeonwoo tried to cheer him up, but depression had already taken over the Twink NPC's mind. On the other hand, Yu happily commended his good work, so Hawu was not bored at all. Jeonwoo stood there confused, seeing how the two were low-key flirting with each other. Just then, Jeonwoo remembered Yukin's reminder not to get too close to Hawu. That said, Jeonwoo simply watched the two lovebirds together. Moments later, the three of them went to a nearby cafeteria, and as they entered, they saw people rushing to buy food. Jeonwoo gave his order to the cashier before staring at the two lovebirds again. He then wondered if being with Yul was the best thing for Hawu. After choosing their food orders, the three sat at one table. Jeonwoo shared some of his early life events, back when he was still a normal baseball player. He was at the peak of his career when he was diagnosed as a guide. At that moment, he felt like his world was falling apart and he could not believe it would happen to him. Hawu sympathized with him, but Jeonwoo told them that being a guide opened him to a whole new experience and earned him a lot of money. Moments later, their food was served and Jeonwoo asked them about their taste. As usual, the Twink NPC chugged down every single meat down his throat like he was not getting enough of it. Jeonwoo then asked Hawu about his college life, so the Twink NPC stopped eating and pondered about it, before telling that he only remembered chugging down a lot of booze. Yul asked him if he remembered how he got home, which Hawu denied, explaining he always blacked out whenever he got drunk. Jeonwoo told him that he could totally picture Hawu in that situation and complimented his face card. Hawu firmly believed that the face card compliment should be given to someone like Yul. That said, he brought it up to Jeonwoo, making it very awkward for him. The GigaChad hunk's eyes sparkled upon hearing Hawu's indirect compliment to him. That said, the Rizlord took the opportunity to flirt with his Twink NPC. Yul looked at Hawu with his dazzling eyes, and Hawu could not stand it, so he looked the other way. Not getting enough attention from Hawu, Yul used his whisper-in-the-ear flirting technique, which Jeonwoo found very awkward. Having had enough cringe for that day, Jeonwoo excused himself from the two and dashed his way out. The Rizlord then asked him again what his prettiest body part was, to which Hawu answered to be his eyes. He told Yul that his eyes were like the color of how he imagined the ocean, leaving him caught off guard. Yul asked Hawu how he would feel if they were purple instead, which made Hawu feel confused. He then recalled Seonwoo's purple eyes and imagined them on Yul. The Twink NPC told Yul that purple eyes would suit him well too. Hearing that, Yul was surprised, so he quickly stood up from his chair and told Hawu to go back to training. Hawu stood up and wondered if he had said something wrong before quickly following Yul. Little did he know, Yul's ear turned red from what he said. Moments later, at the training center, Hawaii came out from the bathroom feeling refreshed. He then pondered the idea of having a month and a half of training left. While walking, he wondered if he would get certified as a guide without proper training. Meanwhile, Yule was standing there waiting for him, and when Hawu got closer, Yule rustled his wet hair. Hawu then looked at Yule in the eye, and the GigaChat hunk smiled at him and commended him for a great job. The GigaChat hunk offered Hawu a back massage, which the Twink NPC found very sus. Yule then held his hand and offered him to do some mattress live action, which gave Hawu a shiver down his spine. Ever since he became Yule's guide, he could literally feel the GigaChat's energy penetrating his body. Whenever they touched, he could feel some time of liquidy stuff coming out of his man-plot. Then the heat inside his body felt like running wild whenever they hug each other. Yule stood before him with his eye lock on Hawu, who thought that their way of guiding was different from last time. Hearing that, the GigaChat hunk asked him if he wanted it the hard way, which irritated the Twink NPC to his core. Yule then teased him, telling him that he could make him climax with his mattress skills if he liked. That said, Hawu threw his childlike tantrums at his hunk Esper. A sudden alarm on Yule's pager watch interrupted their flirting. Yule revealed the bureau would make him work, so Hawu asked him if he would go. The GigaChat hunk asked him if he should answer it, and the Twink NPC nodded. Seeing that, Yule started pouting in disappointment, but Hawu was clueless about his actions. Yule then switched on his Riz mode and told Hawu to wait for him when he got home, and as expected, the submissive Twink reluctantly agreed. The GigaChat hunk whispered into Howow's ears about his hunk shirt's location before leaving him behind. Hawu then got mad and Yule enjoyed every bit of it. Moments later, while Hawu was walking alone, someone in a hoodie followed him. While checking his phone, the hooded individual standing behind him tapped his shoulder, making Hawu turn around quickly. He was an Esper named Gihong who looked like he was having trouble sleeping. Hawu recognized him as an Esper, and he knew that he had to be careful around him. Gihong immediately noticed Howow's pager watch, so he confirmed if he was Yule's guide, which made Hawu feel sus about him. Gihong asked Hawu to give him the pager watch, which Hawu obviously disagreed with. However, Gihong activated his purple eyes and mind-controlled the Twink NPC. Gihong laughed at him for trying to resist, and Hawu removed his pager watch. At that point, Hawu knew he needed to contact Yule, but his body was under Gihong's control. The Twink NPC knew that he was still conscious, but his body was moving on its own. Gihong then took him away, and the two walked together. He talked about being the small fries in the industry that no one cared about before formally introducing himself to Hawu, who seemed to have his conscious mind with him. Gihong was impressed by Howow's capability, so he planned to devour Howow's memories but failed. Soon enough, another Esper named Hyundaek who wondered if Hawu was really under mind control. They then moved to their car, and Hyundaek opened the door for the Twink NPC. Hawu didn't want to get inside, but he had no control over his body, so he sat down like a behaved child. He stared outside the window, thinking about their convo and wondering who Yeondol was up against. It turned out that it was Minister Dong Cheol, and Hawu realized that the old geezer wanted to take his power back. Gihong then told Hyundaek not to think so much about it, but he couldn't help but worry. That said, Gihong gave him a cold stare, making Hyundaek feel scared. Meanwhile, in the rearview mirror of the car, Gihong was looking at the Twink NPC, who seemed very pissed. Nonetheless, Hawu realized that Gihong was too friendly for a kidnapper because he even gave him a genuine smile. Upon reaching the location, Gihong told Hawu to follow him. They then went to a specific hotel room, and while on their way to their destination, the Twink NPC felt it was all so sus. Gihong used the keycard and invited Hawu inside the room. The Twink NPC looks at Gihong, who promised that if he would behave himself, he would untie him. Hawu then blinked his eyes and realized that they had no plan to harm him, so he wondered why they had kidnapped him. Meanwhile, Gihong used his power and untied Howard's hand from his chains, before giving him a serious stare. Then Gihong invited everyone to sit first. Gihong told Howard not to give them the scared look because they are only doing their job. Soon enough, Gihong revealed that he and Hyundaek were both A-class Espers. He even revealed that they were both working for Minister Dongcheol. The Twink NPC then asked him if he brought him there so he could threaten Yule, but Gihong only smiled. Gihong used his telepathy to ask Howard if he believed something like that would work to Yule, to which he was not about. Howard knew that his Prince Charming would save his Twink damsel in distress, so Gihong asked him if Yule would let it slide. Howard disagreed, which was agreed by Gihong as well. The Twink NPC got pissed off by his rhetorical questions, so Gihong told him that he was simply asking for confirmation. Gihong then revealed that there was someone who believed that dirty tricks would work with Yule. Hyundaek reluctantly agreed, and Howard thought they were referring to Minister Dongcheol. Just then, Gihong noticed that someone was calling Howard. It was the GigaChat hunk, and the Twink NPC thought that his timing was uncanny. While calling from another place, the Rizlord did not even hold back in flirting in the first few seconds. Howard was pissed by his BS, which Gihong found very interesting. Gihong continued to listen to their convo, and the twink NPC was surprised that Yule was looking for him. Howard told Jihong that he needed to go home already before Yule found out, but Jihong told him that there was a possibility that Yule would find him already lifeless. The twink NPC then asked him what he wanted, so Jihong told him that it was time for a serious convo. Little did they know, Moon had been monitoring Howard for 2 days already, so he immediately informed Yule that his twink lover was kidnapped. Moon started to feel anxious as Howard's life was like a ticking time bomb, so he wondered if he should do nothing at all. Moon then eavesdropped on their convo, where Jihong talked about them being in a tough situation between Minister Dongchel and Yule. Moon agreed with Jihong's predicament. Jihong explained to Howard that they were put in a situation where they would surely fail, and consequences would await them afterward. Hearing his dilemma, the twink NPC acknowledged their serious problem. When Howard asked them if they could not find a solution, a sudden surging force was about to reach the building. And just like that, the window shattered from an explosive smash, and Howard could only protect himself from it. When the twink NPC opened his eyes, he saw Howard descending from midair. Yule then told him to close his eyes. The twink NPC started fanboying towards the GigaChat hunk as he elegantly descended from midair. Yule quickly wrapped Howard around his arm and kissed him on the forehead. As he stepped on the broken glass shards, Gigong told him that it was just a misunderstanding. However, Yule was standing before him like a true menace. Just then, Hyundeok activated his power and lunged towards Yule. However, the top G Esper simply held his hand and pointed the explosion at somewhere else. Seeing that, Gigong was terrified, and he knew it was also over for him. Yule then approached him and grabbed him by his hand. Howard was in a duck-down position, but he decided to check what was happening. He saw Yule strangling Gigong to death, so he told Yule to stop it. Yule then told him to close his eyes, which left Howell speechless. Hyundeok was already knocked unconscious on the floor, and Yule continued to choke Gigong. Yule's eye turned blue, and he threw the unconscious Gigong on the floor. The Gigong Tad hunk approached Howell, who assured him that he was just fine. Yule then started at him and squished his face before realizing that he was really unharmed. He told Howell not to worry about the 2 ugly losers because he would get rid of them himself. Just then, he picked up Howell like a Disney princess before looking at the 2 Espers once again. Deep down, the twink NPC wanted to help them, but Yule kicked Gigong, sending him crashing onto the wall. The Gigong Tad hunk even told him that he would destroy the entire city if they hurt him. Hearing that, Howell flinched and looked at Yule, whose eyes turned blue again. Howell apologized for the trouble, but Yule revealed that he abandoned an important guest just to save him. Not long after, Howell asked Yule how he managed to find him, so he seized the opportunity to riz him again, saying it was the power of love. The twink NPC felt a little cringe out from what he said, and Yule reminded him of his promise to him. Outside the building, Howell noticed Seungwon standing among the civilians. That said, the jealous Yule asked him if he was close with Seungwon, which Howell denied. Meanwhile, Seungwon was delighted to see his captain safe. Yule then prepared to jump over the balcony, but Howell insisted in taking elevator instead. Moments later, the twink NPC woke up in a room, so he wondered where he was. He looked around and saw the locked door, which he tried to open. However, he turned around and checked the window instead. When he roamed around the house, the twink NPC wondered where he was. Just then, he saw a drawing book on the floor and realized that the place was a kid's room. While wondering where on earth he was, Yule was watching him from behind. Howell heard the opening of the door, so he quickly checked it out. Yule came out from the door and asked why Howell looked startled. Yule stood before Howell with a delighted and light demeanor, and he touched his face, asking if he was hungry. The two stood in silence as they engaged in a staring contest. Just then, the twink NPC's stomach rumbled and admitted that he was hungry. Yule laughed at his innocence and held his hand after offering him a cup of milk. The whole house was organized, and in the kitchen, Yule gave Howell his hot, fresh milk, telling him to drink it up to the last drop. Howell gave it a blow and realized that the milk was worth it. After giving a taste of Yule's milk, Howell was reminded of the rice cake that he received from Yule before. When Howell asked about the temperature transition of the milk, Howell told him that it was easy peasy for him. The GigaChat hunk explained that he only used vibrations to trigger the temperature. Soon after, inside the luxurious house, Yule reminded Howell to brush his teeth before bed. When the twink NPC asked him where they were, Yule revealed that it was his home. That said, Howell realized that Yule was living in 3 different places. Nonetheless, Yule revealed to him that he rarely went to that place, and that he had a study there. Howell imagined his study as a place filled with gold, and Yule was the prince who was reading the book. Seeing him confused, Yule explained that he did not buy the house with his own money. The twink NPC thought he was referring to a loan, but Yule revealed that it was where his family used to live. He then recalled his convo with Yule about him having no family. Howell then assumed that the house was precious to him, which made Yule feel confused. The GigaChat hunk then told him that it was precious to him, but not because of his family. To him, his parents were like heartless monsters, and he never once missed them. Yule's eyes became sad, and he continued explaining that the day he left for the bureau, everyone in that house died except for one person. Yule then locked in his gaze at Haohu and revealed that he had eliminated them all. The twink NPC couldn't fathom how Yule seemed to have no remorse in admitting to a crime. Just then, Yule quickly gave Haohu a back hug and apologized for scaring him. Yule then left him alone, and Haohu realized that he was not joking at all. That said, Haohu started becoming suspicious of Yule's true personality because he knew nothing about his past. He then opened the faucet and washed his face, when suddenly he imagined Yule standing behind him. The twink NPC acknowledged the fact that Yule was nice, kind, and warm, but also had a terrible temper. While pondering things about Yule, the GigaChat hunk moved closer to him. Haohu was not ready yet to accept Yule as a whole when suddenly, he grabbed his hand and Haohu completely fell asleep. Yule then stared at his twink partner with his eyes full of worldly desires. When Haohu woke up, he felt the cozy blanket and warmth of the sun. As usual, Yule was there watching him sleeping, and he told him that he would ask his company to excuse him for that day. Hearing that, Haohu woke up deep down his core and realized that Yule was crazy. He quickly sprang from the bed and accidentally whacked his head with Yule's. He then bounced back from the injury, and he was completely knocked down, wondering why he was in more pain than the one he had headbutted. Yule laughed at Haohu's action and invited him to eat breakfast. The GigaChat hunk then stood up first and went straight to the kitchen. While Haohu was left alone with a painful head, he was about to go outside when he suddenly noticed the notebook he had seen earlier. While wondering where he saw it, he flipped the pages of the notebook before closing it and putting it down. Just then, he left it there and exited the room. Outside the room, the twink NPC smelled the delicious food Yule was preparing. It was a sunny-side-up egg, and Yule seemed very focused on cooking it. Haohu sneaked behind him to give him a jump scare, but Yule noticed him immediately, so he hugged him instead. As they locked gazes with each other, Haohu felt extremely awkward. Not long after, Yule finished plating Yule's breakfast, which made Haohu feel very impressed. As expected, Haohu was so excited to eat Haohu's meaty and tasty sausage and egg. Out of nowhere, the GigaChat hunk asked Haohu if he wanted to live there permanently. The twink NPC raised his fork and Yule gave him a serious glare. Haohu then avoided his gaze and told him that he couldn't quit his job. He then changed the topic by asking Yule what happened to Gikong and Hindechok, so Yule explained it to him. Soon enough, the GigaChat hunk squinted his eyes and smiled at Haohu, offering him to take him to his office. Later on, the entire week became terrible for Haohu because his manager believed that his kidnapping incident was a sign of misfortune, and he had to work extra every day. The twink NPC's eyes looked so tired from lack of sleep, and his negative vibes were sensed by his female colleague. His female colleague asked him why he was overworking again, but Haohu could only give her an awkward smile. She then gave him a chocolate candy to make him feel better. That said, Haohu began stretching and decided to focus even more to finish everything quickly. Later that day, Haohu went home running in the heavy rain. He dashed his way back to the apartment, and soon enough, he reached his unit. There, he noticed Do-hyun waiting patiently for him, so he entered the passkey and the two entered his apartment. Do-hyun bought some tteokbokki for them to share and told Haohu that he decided to meet him that day because it would be more convenient for them to go to their destination from his place. Haohu realized that Do-hyun only wanted to have a sleepover in his apartment, which made him feel embarrassed, thinking he wanted something else. That said, he told Do-hyun to give him a glass of water, and he quickly chugged it down his throat. The twink NPC put down the glass of water, and Do-hyun laughed at him for crying over a spicy food. Not long after, Haohu threw a towel at Do-hyun to take a shower, so Do-hyun took the opportunity to tease him about him suggesting to do plot development. Haohu was not having it, so Do-hyun decided to take a shower already. Not long after, Haohu was already asleep, and Do-hyun wondered why he was asleep already. Haohu woke up and told him that he was getting his bed wet. Do-hyun then turned around and lay down on Haohu's leg, asking him to dry his hair for him. However, after 30 minutes of stubbornness, Haohu decided to do it. Haohu then lied down on the bed and he did some side position before telling Do-hyun not to bother him anymore. Do-hyun started poking the twink NPC with his finger, so out of irritation he let him sleep on his bed. While in bed, Do-hyun talked about some ulterior motive BS and reminded him to be careful with dating an Esper. Do-hyun then gave him solid advice, explaining to him that if someone became interested in him, that person would die. When Haohu asked him why they would die, Do-hyun told him that Yule would definitely kill them because he knew from the very start that he was capable of doing so. In that situation, Haohu couldn't help but agree with him. The next day, Haohu's dad texted him asking if he would come, which made him wonder why. Then, after replying, his dad asked him when he would introduce him to his new friend. He then realized that he could not ever visit him with his new friend, and they continued texting each other. Haohu assumed that if he knew about it, he would be so excited to go. Nonetheless, he put on his necktie, sprayed his perfume, and rubbed it on his neck, ready to go to his destination. Meanwhile, a dazzling Do-hyun in a formal outfit arrived and tried to play it cool in front of Haohu, who low-key liked how he looked. Do-hyun teased him about not falling for him, which quickly annoyed the NPC twink. Haohu then wore his shoes and told Do-hyun to stop by a flower shop. That said, Yoyan told him that they should get going, and Hao followed right away. Just then, Hao checked on Yule's door and noticed he was not around, so he went straight to the elevator. Yoyan drove the car and they bought a bouquet of yellow flowers. While on the way, Hao laughed so hard at the flower seller, who seemed to be into Yoyan. Yoyan then started bragging about it with no touch of humility. To Hao, Yoyan had always been an important person in his life. That said, Hao recalled his childhood memory. When he was still a toddler, he always passed by a lonely, sad boy, but it seemed like he could not remember his face. The only thing he could recall was the child's beautiful eyes. After parking the car, the two entered a columbarium, and there, Hao's father was waiting for them. When he turned around, he immediately asked about Hao's new friend. The twink NPC informed him that his friend couldn't make it, so he asked him about his life instead. His father then told Hao to let him know if anything happened to him. He assured his father that everything was fine and that he should not worry. Meanwhile, his father couldn't help but look at him with worried eyes. His father couldn't believe that his baby toddler back then was now a fully grown man. However, deep inside, he wondered if he did the right thing for his son. Back then, the doctor told him that Hao's trauma was severe and treatment might no longer work for him. Hearing that and seeing his son in a shocked state, Hao's father was devastated. The doctor even told him that treating Hao would take a very long time, so he had to be strong. At home, Hao's father was feeling so devastated and was full of regret. While Hao was asleep, his father was having the devastating if only moment. Just then, the lightning flashed, and a young boy appeared before him. It was the young Yule, and he came for Hao. Hao's father looked at Yule, who gave him a chance to change something in the past. Yule offered to delete Hao's memories of the traumatic incident. However, in return, he had to give him Hao's future. Nonetheless, Yule entrusted Hao to him until he reached the age he could protect him, promising to be back when it's the right time. Yule then moved closer to Hao when suddenly, Hao's father told him that if Hao did not want him, he had to give up on him. Yule agreed to his condition and smiled. The deal was made, and Yule told him to take good care of Hao before completely manipulating Hao's memory. Back at present, Hao and Do-hyun were paying their respect to Hao's deceased mother. Hao's father then clenched his fist because regretting what had happened in the past was useless. That said, he called out his son's name and patted his shoulder before inviting the two for a meal. Later on, Hao was doing some gun training at the site and wondered why his father acted weirdly. It turned out that his father was very caring of him when they ate yesterday. He was looking after Hao and he was so attentive to him. Back at the present, Jeonwoo commended Hao's shooting skills. He acknowledged that it was just his second time, which meant he had a natural talent for shooting a gunload. That said, Jeonwoo demonstrated to him another technique, so he told Hao that he should get into his position as he was ready to unleash his gunload on Hao's target. Meanwhile, the jealous Giga Chad was seething in anger and was about to freeze everything like how Aokiji freezes Marineford. Just then, Hao and Jeonwoo flinched as they noticed the air suddenly got cooler. When he looked at Yule, his face was saying the popular "it's not what it looks like," so Hao told him to behave himself. Meanwhile, Jeonwoo suddenly moved away from him to keep himself from becoming frozen meat. Yule then patted his head and commended him for the progress he had made, making the twink NPC blush. The Giga Chad hunk told him that he needed to improve his stamina as well. Jeonwoo also added that Hao needed to know how to protect himself and asked him what he enjoyed doing. Hao was unsure about it, so Jeonwoo suggested that he visit the abandoned city, where there were black masses of flesh monsters devouring human meat and destroying the city even further. That said, survivors ended up gathering in one city, and the other cities were like abandoned ghost towns. Jeonwoo was not sure if Hao would feel the same way, but he reminded him to tell him his thoughts when he returned. Just then, Yunchen called him, and Jeonwoo happily talked about their upcoming date. At that moment, Hao suddenly recalled Hyun's words about Esper's possessiveness. Then the Giga Chad hunk and the twink NPC engaged in a side-eye staring contest. Jeonwoo ended the call and left the two in the training field. Meanwhile, Yule kept staring at Hao's face, so he asked him if he had something on it. That said, the Rizlord told him that his face had irresistible cuteness on it, making him blush so hard. Hao left the shooting field awkwardly, telling Yule they should go to the next part of the training. The next day, while Hao was out of work, Kim asked him if he would go home soon. Hao confirmed it and revealed that someone was going to pick him up. Hao was caught off guard when Kim brought up his plan to celebrate Hao's birthday. That made the twink NPC feel confused because everyone knew that Yule was dating him. That said, Hao politely declined his offer, which pissed him off greatly. Kim turned around from Hao and his pissed-off aura was sensed by their female colleague, so he came to Hao's table and asked him about what happened. After knowing that Kim's insensitive offer, his female colleague felt so pissed. Hao couldn't understand why Kim got mad, while his female colleague was sus about Kim. Nonetheless, the two went out of their office and she told Hao to tell him right away if Kim would do anything weird. That made Hao recall his past bad experience in the office when he was just a newbie. Apparently, his boss wanted to develop a plot with him, and the next thing he knew was that his boss was eliminated by an unknown person. Hao then told her that Kim would not do anything weird, but she was still suspicious of him. While the two were talking outside, Wol was standing and waiting for him. His female colleague believed it was a serious matter, so Hao assured her that he would be extra careful. Just then, Hao noticed Yule, and he was bringing flowers for him, standing like the ideal boyfriend any gay twink dreamt of.